In 1878, in the wild Arizona territory, a young woman named Norah Bennett is arrested and publicly humiliated simply for daring to wear men's trousers. The town of Copper Creek treats her like a criminal and auctions her off in front of a cheering crowd. When hope seems nearly extinguished, a quiet but feared rancher named Finn Morgan steps forward and pays an outrageous sum to free her. Instead of demanding obedience, Finn shocks everyone by returning Norah's rifle, her horse, and her freedom. Suspicious of every man she's ever met, Norah reluctantly agrees to travel with him to his remote ranch deep in the unforgiving Arizona wilderness. Follow my story to the end, hit like, and comment about the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has traveled. The iron shackles bit into Norah's wrists, but she refused to drop her eyes. Not for the leering faces pressed against the jailhouse window. Not for the sheriff who'd locked her in this cell like she'd murdered someone instead of just wearing a pair of damn trousers. Not for any of them. "You ought to be ashamed," a woman's voice called from outside. "Parading around like that, like some kind of harlot." Norah shifted on the wooden bench, her back against the stone wall. The cell smelled like piss and old sweat. Through the barred window, she could see half of Copper Creek gathering in the street. Word traveled fast in a town this size. Everyone wanted a look at the woman who'd ridden into town 2 days ago wearing men's pants, a work shirt, and a gun belt like she had every right to. She'd made it 3 blocks before someone called the sheriff. The door to the cell block creaked open. Sheriff Wade entered, his boots heavy on the floorboards. He was a thick man with a graying mustache and eyes that didn't quite meet hers. "Miss Bennett," he said. "It's just Norah." "Miss Bennett," he repeated, firmer this time. "The judge has made his ruling." Norah straightened. "Judge? I didn't get a trial. Don't need one for public indecency. Town ordinance is clear. Women dress like women, men dress like men. You broke the law." "I broke a stupid law." Wade's jaw tightened. "Doesn't matter what you think of it. Law's the law." "So what's the sentence? You gonna hang me for wearing pants?" "No." Wade shifted his weight. For the first time, something like discomfort crossed his face. "Judge says you're to be, reassigned." Norah went very still. "Reassigned?" "Auctioned," Wade said quietly, "to a suitable man who can provide proper guidance and supervision." The words landed like a fist to her stomach. She'd heard of this. Frontier towns had their own rules, their own twisted justice. Women without husbands, without male relatives, women who caused trouble. They could be declared dependents of the court and sold off like livestock. It was legal. It was barbaric. And it was about to happen to her. "You can't do this." "Already done," Wade said. "Auction's in an hour. You'll be escorted to the platform. I suggest you cooperate. And if I don't, then you'll be dragged. Your choice." He left before she could spit out a response. The door clanged shut. Norah sat in the dim cell, her heart pounding against her ribs. She'd left Boston to escape this exact kind of control. 3 months of travel, sleeping rough, living on dried meat and creek water, all to get away from her cousin Edmund and his obsessive need to manage her life. And now she was going to be handed over to some stranger because she'd worn the wrong clothes. She pulled at the shackles. The metal held firm. Her rifle was gone. Her horse was gone. Her saddlebags with everything she owned, gone, all confiscated as evidence of her unsuitability. Footsteps approached again, 2 deputies this time, both young and visibly uncomfortable. "Time to go, miss," one of them said. Norah stood. She didn't fight. Not yet. But the deputies saw something in her face that made them keep their distance as they led her out into the blinding Arizona sun. The crowd had grown. Maybe 200 people lined the main street, packed along the boardwalks and spilling into the dirt road. Children sat on their fathers' shoulders. Women whispered behind gloved hands. Men called out crude jokes that made Norah's stomach turn. A wooden platform had been erected in front of the general store. Judge Barton stood at the top, a small gavel in his hand. He was a reedy man with a pointed beard and the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. "Bring her up," he called. The deputies guided Norah up the steps. The crowd pressed closer. She could smell sweat and tobacco and the faint sweetness of beer. Someone threw a rotting tomato that splattered against the platform near her boots. "Whore!" a man shouted. "Ought to be horsewhipped," another voice added. Judge Barton raised his gavel, and the crowd quieted. "Citizens of Copper Creek," he began, his voice carrying across the street, We are gathered here today to address a matter of public morality and order. This woman, Norah Bennett, has willfully violated town ordinances regarding appropriate dress and comportment. Having no husband, father, or male guardian to provide correction, the court has determined that she requires immediate reassignment to a responsible party. "Get on with it," someone yelled. Barton smiled thinly. "The bidding will begin at $50. $50. The price of a decent horse." Norah's hands curled into fists. "50!" a voice called from the crowd. A squat man in a butcher's apron, grinning like he'd just won a prize. "60!" Another man, older, with tobacco-stained teeth. "75!" The bids came faster. Norah stood frozen, her face burning, as men shouted numbers like she was a piece of furniture. Some of them she recognized from the saloon. Others were strangers. None of them looked at her like she was human. The bidding climbed to $120. The butcher was still in, along with a rail-thin man in a dirty suit who kept licking his lips. "120, Barton called. "Do I hear 130? Silence. "Going once? $500. The crowd went dead quiet. Heads turned. Norah followed their gaze. A man stood at the edge of the crowd, tall and lean, wearing a dusty brown coat and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His voice cut through the noise like a blade. Judge Barton blinked. "I'm sorry, did you say?" $500, the man repeated. He stepped forward and the crowd parted. Norah got her first clear look at him. He was maybe 35, with a hard, weathered face and eyes the color of stone. A scar ran from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone. He moved with the kind of controlled stillness that made Norah think of a predator. "Mr. Morgan," Barton said, and there was something new in his voice, caution, maybe fear. "We weren't expecting you in town." "Clearly." Finn Morgan stopped at the base of the platform, his gaze sweeping over Norah for just a moment before returning to the judge. 500. Do I need to repeat myself a third time? No, of course not. Barton's gavel came down fast. Sold to Mr. Finn Morgan of the Triple M Ranch. The crowd erupted. Some cheered. Others muttered in angry disbelief. The butcher spat into the dirt and stalked away. Norah barely heard any of it. Her eyes were locked on Finn Morgan as he climbed the platform steps. "Remove the shackles," he said to the deputies. "Sir, the regulations state—" Finn turned his head slightly. The deputy's words died in his throat. Fumbling, he produced a key and unlocked Norah's wrists. The iron fell away. She rubbed the raw skin, her mind racing. $500. That was insane. That was more than most men in this town made in a year. Finn looked at her directly for the first time. "You got a horse?" Norah blinked. "They took it." "Where?" "Livery stable." "And your belongings?" "Sheriff's office." Finn nodded once, then turned and walked down the platform steps. Norah hesitated for only a second before following. What choice did she have? The crowd watched, uneasy now, as Finn Morgan strode toward the livery stable with Norah at his heels. The stable owner, a nervous man named Pete, practically fell over himself producing Norah's mare, a sturdy buckskin she'd bought in Santa Fe. Finn inspected the horse with a practiced eye, then turned to Pete. "Saddle, bridle, saddlebags, everything." "Yes, sir, Mr. Morgan. Right away." Norah stood to the side, still waiting for the catch. Men didn't spend $500 without expecting something in return. She knew that much. But Finn didn't look at her, didn't speak to her. He just waited, silent and patient, while Pete frantically assembled her gear. When the horse was ready, Finn handed Norah the reins. Then he walked to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Wade was at his desk, clearly trying to look busy. He looked up as Finn entered, and his face went pale. "Mr. Morgan, congratulations on your purchase." "The rifle," Finn said. Wade swallowed. "Sir?" "The woman's rifle, and her gun belt. I assume you confiscated them." "Well, yes, but—" "Return them." "Mr. Morgan, with all due respect, she's a woman. She doesn't need—" Finn's hand came down on the desk, not hard, but the sound made Wade flinch. "I paid $500. I own her contract. That means her property is my property. Return it, now." Wade scrambled to the back room. He returned with Norah's Winchester rifle and her worn leather gun belt. Finn took them without a word and walked back outside. Norah was still standing with her horse, her mind spinning. Finn handed her the rifle and the belt. "These are yours," he said. She stared at him. "What?" "Your rifle, your gun belt, your horse. They're yours." "I don't understand." "You will." Finn walked to his own horse, a tall roan stallion tied to the hitching post. He swung into the saddle with ease. "You can ride with me to the Triple M, or you can ride off wherever you want. Your choice." Norah's throat tightened. "You're giving me a choice?" "I'm not giving you anything. You already had a choice. I'm just telling you what your options are. Why did you pay $500 for me if you're just going to let me go?" Finn looked at her, and for the first time, something almost like emotion flickered in his eyes. "Because no one should be sold like livestock, and because you look like you'd rather die than let those bastards win." He turned his horse and started riding out of town. Norah stood in the street, her rifle in her hands, her horse's reins clutched in her fist. Behind her, the crowd was still murmuring. Sheriff Wade was watching from his doorway. Judge Barton looked furious. She could ride away, head south, maybe, or west. Finn Morgan had given her that option, but something in his words, in the flat honesty of them, made her pause. She mounted her horse and rode after him. They rode in silence for the first hour. The town disappeared behind them, swallowed by the red and gold desert. The land here was harsh, beautiful, in a way that could kill you if you weren't careful. Saguaro cacti stood like sentinels. The sun hammered down, relentless. Finn didn't speak, didn't look back to see if she was following. He just rode steady and sure, like he'd made this journey 1,000 times. Finally, Norah couldn't take it anymore. "Why?" Finn glanced over his shoulder. "Why what?" "Why did you do it?" "Really?" "I told you." "No one spends $500 out of principle." Finn reined his horse to a stop. Norah pulled up beside him. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You're right," he said. "I had another reason." Norah's stomach tightened. Here it comes, she thought, the real price. "I need a bookkeeper," Finn said. She blinked. "What?" "A bookkeeper, someone who can read and write and keep the ranch accounts straight. My last one quit 3 months ago. Moved to California. I've been doing it myself and I'm not good at it." "You paid $500 for a bookkeeper?" "I paid $500 to stop a travesty. Hiring you as a bookkeeper is a separate matter." Finn's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "You can read and write, can't you?" "Of course I can." "Then the job's yours if you want it. Pay is $30 a month plus room and board. You'd have your own cabin. You'd work with me and the ranch hands, keep the ledgers, manage supply orders, that kind of thing." Norah stared at him. "You're serious?" "I don't joke much." "And if I say no?" "Then you ride off and I wish you well. Just like that." Just like that. Norah looked out at the desert. The sun was starting to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. She thought about riding off alone. Thought about Boston, about Edmund, about every man who'd ever tried to control her. Finn Morgan wasn't like them. She could feel it, even if she didn't understand it yet. "How far is your ranch?" she asked. "Another 3 hours?" "And you're really going to let me wear pants?" "I don't care if you wear a flour sack, long as you can do the work." Norah made her decision. "All right, I'll come. But I'm keeping my rifle loaded. I'd be disappointed if you didn't." They rode on, Assad. The Triple M Ranch appeared just as the last light was fading from the sky. It was bigger than Norah had expected, sprawling, with a main house, several outbuildings, corrals, and a bunkhouse. Smoke rose from the cookhouse chimney. She could hear cattle lowing in the distance. Finn dismounted near the barn. A man emerged from the shadows, older, with a grizzled beard and a pronounced limp. "Boss?" the man said. Then he saw Norah and stopped. "Who's this?" "New bookkeeper," Finn said. "Norah Bennett, this is Cyrus Webb. He runs the bunkhouse and keeps the hands in line." Cyrus squinted at her. "A woman bookkeeper? You have a problem with that?" "No, sir." Cyrus's tone was carefully neutral. "Just surprising, is all. She'll be staying in the old line shack by the creek. Make sure it's cleaned out and stocked." "Yes, sir." Finn turned to Norah. "Come on, I'll show you the office." She followed him into the main house. It was simple but solid, built from timber and stone. The office was a cluttered room off the main hallway, with a desk buried under papers, ledgers stacked haphazardly, and dust coating everything. "This is a mess," Norah said. "I know. That's why I need help." Finn gestured to the ledgers. "Previous bookkeeper kept everything organized. I've been trying, but—" He trailed off, looking almost embarrassed. Norah picked up one of the ledgers and flipped it open. The numbers were a disaster. Entries crossed out, pages torn, calculations that made no sense. She winced. "How have you not gone bankrupt?" "Luck, mostly." "That's not a business strategy." "I'm aware." Finn leaned against the doorframe. "Can you fix it?" Norah ran her finger down a column of figures. It would take weeks to sort through this chaos, but she'd always been good with numbers. Better than good. It was one of the few things her mother had taught her before she died. "Yeah," she said. "I can fix it." "Good. Start tomorrow. For tonight, get some rest. Cyrus will have your cabin ready." Finn left. Norah stood alone in the office, surrounded by the wreckage of the ranch's accounts, and allowed herself a small, disbelieving smile. She'd been arrested, humiliated, auctioned off like property, and now she was standing in a rancher's office in the middle of the Arizona desert with a job, a place to sleep, and her rifle still on her back. It was the strangest turn her life had ever taken, but for the first time in months, she didn't feel like she was running. Boku. The cabin was small but clean. Cyrus had done his job. There was a bed with a quilt, a washstand, a chair, and a small stove. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Norah set her rifle against the wall and sank onto the bed. Her body ached. Her wrists were still raw from the shackles, but she was free. She thought about Finn Morgan, about the way he'd stood on that platform and paid an absurd amount of money without hesitation, about the way he'd handed her back her rifle like it was the most natural thing in the world. She didn't trust him yet. She couldn't afford to. But there was something in his eyes, something steady and unyielding that made her think maybe, just maybe, he was different. Outside, the desert night settled in. Coyotes called in the distance. Stars filled the sky. So many she couldn't count them. Norah closed her eyes and let herself believe, just for tonight, that she'd finally found a place where she could breathe. Morning came too early. Norah woke to the sound of roosters and men's voices. She dressed quickly, braided her hair, and strapped on her gun belt before stepping outside. The ranch was already alive with activity. Hands moved between the corrals and the barn. Smoke rose from the cookhouse. Finn stood near the main house, talking to Cyrus and another man Norah didn't recognize. She walked over. The men stopped talking and looked at her. "Morning," Finn said. "Sleep all right?" "Well enough." "Good. This is Tom Ridley. He's my foreman." Tom was a compact man with sharp eyes and a suspicious expression. He nodded at Norah but didn't offer his hand. "Ma'am?" "Just Norah." "Ma'am," Tom repeated more firmly this time. Finn gestured toward the house. "Breakfast is in the cookhouse. After that, I'll walk you through the accounts." Norah followed the men to the cookhouse, a long building filled with rough tables and benches. The ranch hands were already eating bacon, eggs, biscuits, and coffee. Conversation died when Norah walked in. She ignored the stares and filled a plate. Finn sat across from her, eating in silence. The hands exchanged glances, but no one spoke. Finally, one of them, a young man with red hair and freckles, cleared his throat. "So, you're the new bookkeeper?" "That's right." "You know numbers and such?" "I do." "Huh." The young man looked impressed. "That's something. Most folks out here can't read past their own name." "Most folks out here haven't had the opportunity," Norah said. "Fair point." The conversation slowly resumed. The hands were cautious, but not hostile. Norah got the sense that they were waiting to see what she would do, how she would handle herself. Fine. She'd prove herself the same way she always had, by working harder than anyone expected. After breakfast, Finn led her back to the office. He pulled out the ledgers and began explaining the ranch's operations. Cattle sales, supply purchases, payroll, expenses. It was a lot, but Norah followed easily. She'd managed her father's business back in Boston before he died. This was bigger, messier, but the principles were the same. "You'll report directly to me," Finn said. "Once a week, we'll go over the numbers. If you see something that doesn't make sense, tell me. I don't want surprises." Understood. And Norah? She looked up. If any of the hands give you trouble, you come to me. I don't tolerate disrespect on this ranch. I can handle myself. I'm sure you can, but you don't have to, not here. There was something in his voice, a quiet conviction that made Norah's chest tighten. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Finn left her to work. Norah rolled up her sleeves and dove into the ledgers. The numbers were worse than she'd thought. Entire months were missing. Some entries were duplicated. Others made no sense at all. But beneath the chaos, she could see the bones of a solid operation. The ranch was profitable, or it could be, if someone just organized the damn records. She worked through the morning and into the afternoon, losing track of time. When she finally looked up, the sun was low and her hand was cramping from writing. Cyrus appeared in the doorway. Supper's ready. Norah set down her pen. Her back ached, her eyes burned, but she'd made progress. Real progress. Thanks, she said. You always work like this? Cyrus asked. Like what? Like the world's ending if you stop. Norah smiled faintly. Old habit, Cyrus grunted. Well, don't kill yourself. Boss won't like it. He left. Norah stood, stretched, and walked back to the cookhouse. The days fell into a rhythm. Norah worked in the office, untangling the financial mess one ledger at a time. She ate meals with the hands, who slowly warmed to her. She slept in her cabin and woke before dawn. Finn checked in once a day, usually in the late afternoon. He'd sit across from her, review her work, ask questions. He never praised her, but he never criticized either. It was a strange kind of respect, quiet, unspoken, but real. 2 weeks in, Tom Ridley stopped by the office. He stood in the doorway, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable. Need something? Norah asked. Just wanted to say, you're doing good work, real good. Norah blinked. Thank you. I wasn't sure about you at first, Tom admitted. Woman doing a man's job and all. But you know what you're doing, and that's what matters. I appreciate that. Tom nodded and left. Norah sat back in her chair, a small smile tugging at her lips. It wasn't much, but it was something. That evening, she found Finn outside, mending a fence. She approached slowly, not wanting to interrupt. Need help? She asked. I'm all right. Finn drove a nail into the post, then looked up. You settling in? I think so. Good. They stood in silence for a moment. The sun was setting, painting the desert in gold and red. It was beautiful in a way that still took Norah's breath away. Why did you really buy me? She asked quietly. Finn set down his hammer. I told you. You told me a reason. I'm asking for the truth. Finn looked at her, his gray eyes steady. My mother was sold like that. When I was a boy, my father died, and the town decided she needed a new husband. They auctioned her off to a man who beat her until she couldn't stand. She died when I was 12. Norah's breath caught. I swore, Finn continued, his voice low and hard, that I'd never let that happen to another woman if I could stop it. So when I heard what they were doing to you, I rode into town. I paid the money, and I'd do it again. Norah's throat tightened. I'm sorry. Don't be. Just don't let anyone make you small. You're worth more than that. He picked up his hammer and went back to work. Norah stood there, her heart pounding, and realized with a sudden, terrifying clarity that she was starting to trust him, and that scared her more than anything. The first real test came 3 weeks into her time at the Triple M. Norah was in the office, reviewing the payroll, when she heard shouting outside. She stood and walked to the window. A group of men on horseback had ridden into the yard. 5 of them, dusty and armed. The ranch hands had stopped working, watching warily. Finn stood in front of the main house, his posture relaxed but his hand near his gun. Norah recognized the leader immediately. Richard Thornton. He owned the largest saloon in Copper Creek, and from what she'd heard, half the town owed him money. He was a big man, well-dressed, with a smile that never looked quite right. Morgan, Thornton called. Heard you made quite the purchase in town. News travels, Finn said. Indeed it does. Mind if I have a word with the lady? I do mind, actually. Thornton's smile widened. Now don't be unreasonable. I just want to make sure she's being treated well. Poor thing looked so distressed on that platform. She's fine. I'd like to hear that from her. Norah stepped outside before Finn could respond. She walked across the yard, her hand resting on her gun belt. The ranch hand shifted, ready to move if needed. "I'm fine," Norah said. Thornton looked her up and down, his gaze lingering in a way that made her skin crawl. "Miss Bennett, I'm Richard Thornton. I wanted to extend an offer. If you ever find yourself in need of better accommodations, my saloon always has work available." "I'm not interested." "Are you sure? I pay well, and the work is much less strenuous than ranch labor." "I said I'm not interested." Thornton's smile thinned. "You know, I've been hearing some troubling stories about you, stories from back east, about a cousin who's very worried about your well-being." Norah went cold. "Edmund." Somehow, Thornton knew about Edmund. "I don't have a cousin," she said. "Now, that's strange, because I received a letter just last week from a Mr. Edmund Carlyle of Boston. He's quite concerned about you, says you ran away from his care, says you're not well." "He's lying." "Is he?" "Because he's offering a substantial reward for information about your whereabouts. And he's prepared to come out here himself if necessary." Norah's hands curled into fists. "He has no claim on me." "The law might disagree, especially if he can prove you're mentally unfit." Finn stepped forward. "That's enough, Thornton. I'm just trying to help the lady." "No, you're not. You're trying to stir up trouble. Now get off my land." Thornton's eyes hardened. "This isn't over, Morgan. That woman is going to bring you nothing but problems. Mark my words." He turned his horse and rode out, his men following. Norah stood frozen, her heart racing. Finn touched her arm gently. "Inside." She followed him into the house. Her hands were shaking. Finn poured her a glass of water, and she drank it in one gulp. "Edmund Carlyle," Finn said. "Your cousin?" "Yes." "And he's trying to claim you're insane?" "He's been trying to control me since my father died. I'm the only heir to my father's estate. If Edmund can prove I'm unfit, he gets everything." "Is he likely to come here?" "I don't know." Norah sank into a chair. "I thought I'd left all that behind. I thought if I came west, he'd give up." "Men like that don't give up. They just get more creative." "So what do I do?" Finn was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You stand your ground, you don't run, and you let me and the boys back you up." "Why would you do that?" "Because you work for me, and I protect what's mine." The way he said it, calm, matter of fact, like it was the simplest thing in the world, made Norah's chest ache. "Thank you," she whispered. Finn nodded. "Get some rest. We'll deal with this together." Norah left the house and walked back to her cabin. The desert night was cool, the stars bright overhead. She thought about Edmund, about the years she'd spent under his suffocating control, about the night she'd finally run, taking only what she could carry. She'd come so far, she'd fought so hard, and she'd be damned if she let him drag her back. But over the next few days, tension settled over the ranch like a storm cloud. The hands were on edge. Norah threw herself into her work, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Finn doubled the watch at night. He also sent Tom into town to ask questions, to find out what Thornton was planning. Tom came back with troubling news. "Thornton's been spreading rumors," Tom said, "telling folks that Norah's unstable, that she's dangerous. He's got some people believing it." "And the sheriff?" Finn asked. "Wade's staying out of it, for now. But if Thornton keeps pushing, he might not have a choice." Finn's jaw tightened. "Then we need to be ready." That night, Norah couldn't sleep. She lay in her cabin staring at the ceiling, her rifle propped against the wall. Every sound outside made her tense. Just before dawn, she heard it. Hoofbeats, fast and hard. She grabbed her rifle and ran outside. Finn was already in the yard, along with Cyrus and several hands. A rider was approaching, one of the younger hands who'd been watching the south boundary. "Boss," the rider called. "Trouble. Men camped about 2 miles out, maybe a dozen of them. They've got Thornton's brand on their horses." Finn's expression went cold. "Armed?" "Yes, sir." "All right, wake everyone. I want every hand on watch. No one leaves the ranch. No one comes in without my say-so." The rider galloped off. Finn turned to Norah. "Get back inside." "No." "Norah, I'm not hiding. If they're coming for me, I'll face them." Finn stared at her, and for a moment she thought he'd argue. But then he nodded. "Fine, but you stay close to me." The men moved with practiced efficiency, taking positions around the ranch. Norah loaded her rifle and checked her revolver. Her hands were steady. Her mind was clear. Whatever was coming, she was ready. The sun rose over the desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. And in the distance, dust rose from the south. They were coming. The dust cloud grew larger, spreading across the southern horizon like a bruise. Norah stood beside Finn near the main house, her rifle cradled in her arms. Around them, the ranch hands had taken their positions, some behind water troughs, others at the corners of buildings, a few on the roof of the barn with clear sightlines. The morning air was still cool, but sweat dampened Norah's collar. Cyrus limped over, a shotgun in his gnarled hands. "Counts about 15 riders, boss. Maybe more behind them." Finn nodded, his face expressionless. "Hold positions. No one fires unless I give the word. And if they come in shooting, then we make them regret it." Cyrus grunted and moved back to his post. Norah glanced at Finn. His hand rested near his revolver, relaxed but ready. She'd seen men prepare for violence before. Back in Boston, drunken brawls outside taverns, angry creditors threatening her father. But this was different. This felt organized, deliberate. "You ever been in a gunfight?" Finn asked quietly. "No." "If shooting starts, get behind cover and stay low. Don't try to be a hero." "I'm not trying to be anything. I'm just trying to survive." "Good. Keep that in mind." The riders came into view, a ragged line spreading across the desert floor. Thornton rode at the center, his bulk unmistakable even at a distance. The men flanking him were hard-looking types, the kind who hired out for range wars and claim disputes. Norah recognized two of them from Copper Creek, drifters who spent their money on whiskey and cards. Finn stepped forward, his voice carrying across the yard. "That's far enough, Thornton." The riders pulled up about 50 yards out, close enough to talk but far enough that any shooting would give the ranch hands time to react. Thornton urged his horse forward a few steps, that oily smile plastered across his face. "Morning, Morgan. Beautiful day, isn't it? State your business. Now, is that any way to greet a concerned citizen? I've come to discuss a matter of great importance to the community." "You've come to cause trouble. I'm giving you 10 seconds to turn around." Thornton's smile thinned. "I have a legal matter to discuss, concerning Miss Bennett." Norah's stomach twisted, but she kept her expression neutral. Finn didn't move. "Miss Bennett is employed on my ranch. Any business you have with her goes through me. I'm afraid it doesn't work that way." Thornton pulled a folded paper from his coat. "I've received correspondence from Mr. Edmund Carlisle of Boston, along with documentation proving Miss Bennett is mentally incompetent and legally under his guardianship. As a concerned party, I'm here to escort her back to proper care." "Let me see that documentation." "I don't think that's necessary." "Let me see it." Thornton hesitated, then motioned to one of his men. The man rode forward slowly, the paper held out. Tom Ridley intercepted him halfway, took the paper, and brought it back to Finn. Finn unfolded it and read. His expression didn't change, but Norah saw his jaw tighten. After a long moment, he handed the paper to Norah. She scanned it quickly. It was a letter on official-looking letterhead from a Boston attorney claiming that Edmund Carlisle had been granted legal guardianship over Norah Bennett due to her hysterical and irrational behavior following the death of her father. Attached was a medical certificate signed by a Dr. Harrison Prescott, declaring Norah unfit to manage her own affairs. It was all fabricated. Every word. Dr. Prescott had been on Edmund's payroll for years, signing whatever papers Edmund wanted. But it looked legitimate, and out here, that might be enough. "This is a fraud," Norah said, her voice shaking with anger. "Every word of it." "That's a serious accusation," Thornton said. "Do you have proof?" "Do you?" "I have legal documentation." "What do you have?" "A history of running away from family, dressing inappropriately, defying social norms. Doesn't exactly paint a picture of stability, does it?" Finn folded his arms. "Even if that document were legitimate, which it's not, it has no legal standing in Arizona territory. Boston court orders don't mean shit out here. The territorial judge might disagree. Then let him. Until I see a territorial warrant, Miss Bennett stays on my land." Thornton's face darkened. "You're interfering with a lawful guardianship. I'm protecting an employee from harassment. Now get off my property before I have you removed." For a long moment, no one moved. The tension stretched tight as a wire. Thornton's men shifted in their saddles, hands drifting toward weapons. The ranch hands tensed, ready. Then Thornton smiled again, but this time there was nothing friendly in it. "You're making a mistake, Morgan. A big one. That woman is going to destroy everything you've built here. Mark my words." He wheeled his horse and rode off, his men following. The dust cloud rolled back toward town, slowly dissipating in the morning sun. Finn didn't lower his guard until they were out of sight. Then he turned to the hands. "Stay on watch, rotating shifts, 4-hour blocks. No one's alone. Tom, I want scouts on the boundaries, rotating every 2 hours." "Yes, sir." The hands dispersed. Finn looked at Norah. "Inside." She followed him into the house. Her hands were trembling now, adrenaline draining away and leaving her hollow. Finn poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed her one. She drank it in a single swallow. "He's not going to stop," she said. "No, he's not. Why does he care? What's in it for him?" "Money. Your cousin's probably paying him, or promised him a cut when he gets control of your father's estate." Finn set down his glass. "Men like Thornton, they see an opportunity and they take it. Doesn't matter who gets hurt." "So what do we do?" "We fight, but smart. We need to discredit that documentation, prove it's a forgery. That means we need help." "What kind of help?" "Legal help. There's a lawyer in Tucson, a woman named Margaret Hayes. She's handled territorial disputes before. If anyone can tear apart that paperwork, it's her." Norah blinked. "A woman lawyer?" "Best in the territory. She doesn't lose." Finn walked to his desk and pulled out a sheet of paper. "I'll write to her today. In the meantime, you stay close to the ranch. No riding out alone, no trips to town." "I'm not hiding. I'm not asking you to hide. I'm asking you to be smart. Thornton's playing dirty. We need to be ready for anything." Norah wanted to argue, but the logic was sound. She nodded reluctantly. "Fine, but I'm keeping my rifle loaded." "I wouldn't expect anything less." The rest of the day passed in uneasy quiet. The hands went about their work, but everyone was on edge. Norah tried to focus on the ledgers, but the numbers blurred. She kept seeing Thornton's face, that smug certainty that he'd already won. That evening, she found Finn in the barn, checking on a mare that was due to foal soon. He looked up as she approached. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Not yet." She leaned against the stall door. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Why are you doing this? You could just hand me over. It would be easier." Finn straightened, brushing hay from his hands. "You think I'm the kind of man who takes the easy way?" "I don't know what kind of man you are." "Then let me tell you." Finn stepped closer, his gray eyes steady on hers. "I'm the kind of man who keeps his word. I hired you. That means I stand by you, and I'm the kind of man who doesn't let bullies win. Ever. Not when I can do something about it. Even if it costs you. Especially then." Norah's throat tightened. She'd spent so long expecting betrayal, expecting men to choose their own comfort over doing the right thing, that Finn's blunt honesty felt like a punch to the chest. "I don't know how to repay you," she said quietly. "You already are. You're doing your job. You're standing your ground. That's all I need." He turned back to the mare, gently running his hand along her side. Norah watched him for a moment, then left the barn. The night air was cool, the stars impossibly bright. She walked back to her cabin, her mind churning. For the first time since Boston, she felt something she hadn't expected to feel again. Hope. The next 3 days passed without incident. Finn sent his letter to Tucson and received a reply faster than expected. Margaret Hayes was interested in the case and would arrive at the ranch within the week to review the documentation and prepare a defense. Norah threw herself into the ledgers with renewed focus. She reorganized the entire accounting system, created new categories for expenses, and drafted a quarterly report that clearly showed the ranch's profitability. Finn reviewed it one evening and actually smiled. "This is good work," he said. "Really good. It's just numbers." "It's more than that. It's proof this place is worth something. That matters." Norah felt a flush of pride. She'd always been good with numbers, but no one had ever acknowledged it like this. Edmund had dismissed her skills as unladylike. Her father had been too distracted by his own failing health to notice. But Finn saw what she could do, and he valued it. On the 4th day, Tom rode back from town with news. Thornton had filed a formal complaint with the territorial marshal, claiming Finn was harboring a fugitive. The marshal had reportedly dismissed it as a civil matter, but the complaint was on record. Thornton was building a case, piece by piece. "He's trying to make you look like the criminal," Tom said, "painting you as the unreasonable one, keeping a poor, defenseless woman against her will." Finn's expression was grim. "Then we need to move faster. When's Hayes arriving?" "Day after tomorrow, according to her wire." "Good. We'll present everything to her and let her figure out our strategy." That night, Norah was working late in the office when she heard a soft knock. She looked up to find Cyrus standing in the doorway, his hat in his hands. "Sorry to interrupt, miss." "It's fine. What do you need?" Cyrus shifted his weight. "Just wanted to say, you've earned the respect of the hands, all of them. They see how hard you work. They see you're not afraid. That matters to men like us." Norah felt a lump in her throat. "Thank you. And they'll stand with you if it comes to that. Just thought you should know." He left before she could respond. Norah sat in the quiet office, staring at the ledgers, and felt something break open inside her chest. She'd spent so long fighting alone, trusting no one, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to have people at her back. The feeling was overwhelming and terrifying, because now she had something to lose. Margaret Hayes arrived 2 days later, riding in a hired buggy with a leather satchel and an expression that could cut glass. She was maybe 50, with steel gray hair pinned in a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. She wore a dark traveling dress and sensible boots, and when she climbed down from the buggy, she moved with the brisk efficiency of someone who'd seen it all and wasn't impressed by any of it. Finn met her in the yard. "Mrs. Hayes, thank you for coming." "It's Miss Hayes, and you can thank me after I win." She turned to Norah. "You're the woman causing all this fuss?" "I'm Norah Bennett." "Good. Let's see what we're dealing with." They moved into the office. Hayes spread the forged documents across the desk and studied them with the focus of a hawk eyeing prey. She pulled out a magnifying glass, examined signatures, held pages up to the light. After 20 minutes, she set everything down and looked at Norah. "Tell me about your cousin." Norah took a breath and told her. About her father's death. About Edmund's obsessive control. About the doctors he'd paid to declare her unstable. About the night she'd run, taking only her mother's jewelry and enough money to get out of Boston. Hayes listened without interrupting. When Norah finished, the lawyer sat back in her chair. "These documents are forgeries," she said flatly. "Not even good ones. The letterhead is wrong. The law firm listed doesn't exist. The medical certificate uses language that wouldn't appear in a legitimate psychiatric evaluation. And the notary seal is a joke." "Can you prove it?" Finn asked. "In court? Absolutely. But that's not the real problem." Hayes tapped the papers. "The problem is that Thornton knows these are fake. He's using them as a smokescreen. He doesn't actually care about your cousin's claim. He's creating chaos, forcing you to respond, tying you up in legal battles. Meanwhile, he's probably working a different angle." "What angle?" Norah asked. "That's what we need to find out. Men like Thornton don't waste this much effort unless there's a bigger payoff." Hayes looked at Finn. "What does he want from you?" Finn frowned. "Nothing. I've never had business with him." "You sure about that?" "Positive. I don't gamble, don't drink in his saloon, don't owe him money." "Then why is he targeting your ranch specifically? Why not just go after Miss Bennett directly?" The question hung in the air. Finn's expression shifted, something dark moving behind his eyes. "Water," he said quietly. Hayes raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "This ranch sits on one of the best water sources in the territory. The creek runs year-round, never dries up. Thornton's been buying up land south of here for the past 2 years. Cattle operations mostly, but cattle need water, and the only reliable source is my creek." "Has he approached you about selling water rights?" 3 times. I refused each time." Hayes smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "There's your motive. He can't buy you out, so he's trying to ruin you. Make you look like a criminal harboring a fugitive. Damage your reputation, drive away your hands, force you to sell." "That son of a bitch," Tom muttered from the doorway. Hayes gathered the documents. "Here's what we're going to do. First, I'm filing a complaint with the territorial marshal, exposing these forgeries and demanding an investigation into Thornton's activities. Second, I'm requesting a formal hearing to establish Miss Bennett's legal independence. Third, I'm going to dig into Thornton's land purchases and find out who's backing him, Men like that don't operate alone. What do we do in the meantime? Norah asked. You stay visible. You keep working. You act like you have nothing to hide because you don't. Hayes fixed Norah with a sharp look. And you be prepared for this to get uglier before it gets better. Cornered men do desperate things. That night, Norah couldn't sleep. She lay in her cabin, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. Thornton wasn't just going after her. He was going after Finn, using her as the weapon. Everything Finn had built, everything he'd worked for was at risk because he'd chosen to help her. The guilt sat in her chest like a stone. She got up, pulled on her boots, and walked out into the cool night. The ranch was quiet, just the sound of insects and the distant murmur of the creek. She walked toward the main house, not sure what she was looking for, and found Finn sitting on the porch steps, a cup of coffee in his hands. Can't sleep either? He asked. Norah sat down beside him. I'm sorry. For what? For bringing this down on you. You should never have bought me from that auction. You should have let someone else deal with it. Finn took a sip of coffee. You think I regret it? You should. Well, I don't. He looked at her, his expression serious. You didn't ask for any of this, Norah. Your cousin's a bastard. Thornton's a bastard. The town that auctioned you off like property, they're all bastards. You're just trying to live your life. There's no shame in that. But your ranch will be fine. I've dealt with worse than Richard Thornton. Like what? Finn was quiet for a moment. 5 years ago, a group of claim jumpers tried to take this land. Said my deed was fraudulent, that I'd stolen the property. They hired gunmen, burned my fields, poisoned my cattle, tried to starve me out. What happened? I fought back, lost half my herd, nearly lost the ranch, but I didn't give up. And eventually the truth came out. The claim jumpers were arrested. I rebuilt. How? By refusing to quit. By trusting the people who stood with me. By believing that justice, even frontier justice, would eventually show up. He looked at her. You're not a burden, Norah. You're just another fight. And I don't lose fights. Norah felt her eyes sting. She blinked hard, refusing to cry. Why do you care so much? Because someone has to. Finn set down his coffee. This territory is full of people who will take advantage of anyone weaker. Women, immigrants, people without connections. If men like me don't stand up, who will? You make it sound simple. It is simple, right and wrong. Most people just make it complicated because doing the right thing is hard. They sat in silence for a while, the night settling around them. Norah felt something shift inside her, something she couldn't quite name. It wasn't just gratitude, it was deeper than that, more dangerous. She was starting to care about Finn Morgan, really care, and that terrified her. The hearing was set for 2 weeks later in the territorial courthouse in Prescott. Hayes had filed all the necessary paperwork, including affidavits from Finn and several of the ranch hands attesting to Norah's competence and character. She'd also uncovered something interesting. Thornton's recent land purchases had been financed by a Boston investment group. Hayes was still tracing the connections, but she suspected Edmund Carlisle was involved. In the days leading up to the hearing, tension on the ranch ratcheted higher. Strange things started happening. Fences were cut, cattle wandered off. One night someone took a shot at one of the hands on patrol. The bullet missed, but the message was clear. Thornton was escalating. Finn doubled the watch again. He also sent 2 men into town to keep eyes on Thornton's saloon, tracking who came and went. The reports were troubling. More hired guns were arriving, drifters with hard faces and well-worn weapons. He's building an army, Tom said grimly, planning something big. Then we plan bigger, Finn replied. 3 days before the hearing, Norah was in the office when she heard shouting from the yard. She grabbed her rifle and ran outside. A rider had just come in, one of the scouts. His face was pale, his horse lathered with sweat. Boss, trouble at the south boundary, fire! Finn was already moving. How bad? Bad. Grass fire spreading fast, winds pushing it north, straight toward the ranch. Every man scrambled. Finn started barking orders, organizing teams to fight the fire, others to move the cattle to safety. Norah ran to help, but Finn grabbed her arm. No, you stay here with Cyrus. Guard the house. I can help. Not with this. If that fire's a distraction, we need someone watching the ranch. That someone is you. He was right, and she knew it. She nodded, her chest tight with frustration and fear. Finn mounted his horse and rode out with Tom and most of the hands, leaving only Cyrus and two younger men behind. Norah stood in the yard, rifle in hand, watching smoke rise in the south. The wind carried the smell of burning grass. She could hear cattle bellowing in the distance, panicked. Cyrus limped over. "Come on, we'll watch from the roof. Better vantage." They climbed to the roof of the main house. From there, Norah could see the fire, a line of orange and red cutting across the desert. The men were already at work, beating at the flames, trying to create a fire break. An hour passed. Then 2. The smoke grew thicker. The sun climbed higher, turning the sky hazy and oppressive. Then Cyrus stiffened. "Riders, from the west." Norah turned. 6 men on horseback, coming in fast. Not from town, from the opposite direction. "That's not our boys," Cyrus said. "No," Norah agreed. "It's not." She raised her rifle, her heart pounding. The riders split up as they approached, spreading out to surround the ranch. They weren't trying to hide, they wanted to be seen. One of them rode straight for the main house and reined up below the roof. It was one of Thornton's men, the same one who delivered the forged documents. "Norah Bennett," he called. "Mr. Thornton would like a word." "Tell Mr. Thornton to go to hell," Norah shouted back. The man grinned. "Now, that's not very polite. He's offering you a deal. You come with us peaceful-like. We leave the ranch alone. Fire gets put out. Everyone goes home safe." "I'm not going anywhere." "Then the fire keeps burning, and maybe some other accidents happen. Be a shame if this nice house caught a spark." Cyrus raised his shotgun. "You threaten this ranch again, boy, and you'll be bleeding out in the dirt." The man's grin faded. "You got 2 minutes to decide." He turned his horse and rode back to join his companions. They waited, just out of rifle range, watching. Norah's mind raced. If she refused, they'd burn the ranch. If she went with them, who knew what Thornton would do? She could disappear, end up back in Edmund's custody. Or worse. "Don't even think about it," Cyrus said, reading her expression. "Boss would never forgive himself. And I'll never forgive myself if this place burns because of me." "Girl, listen, these bastards are bluffing. They start a fire here, they'll have the whole territory after them. Arson's a hanging offense. They're trying to scare you." "They're doing a good job." One of the younger hands climbed onto the roof. "Miss Norah, I can ride for the boss. Get him back here." "No," Norah said. "They need everyone at the fire. We handle this ourselves." She raised her rifle and sighted on the lead rider. "Time's up," she called. "You've got 10 seconds to leave before I put a bullet in someone." The men laughed. One of them drew his revolver. That's when the shot rang out. Not from Norah. From the barn. The lead rider jerked and fell from his horse, clutching his shoulder. Blood spread across his shirt. The other riders wheeled their horses, confused. Another shot, this time from the bunkhouse. Another man down, screaming, his legs shattered. Norah realized what was happening. The 2 young hands hadn't been on the roof. They'd taken positions in the outbuildings, waiting. "Smart boys," Cyrus muttered. The remaining riders scattered, riding hard for cover. Norah fired, clipping one man's horse. The animal stumbled and threw its rider. The man scrambled to his feet and ran. Within minutes, it was over. 3 men wounded, the rest fleeing. Cyrus climbed down and checked on the injured. One was unconscious. The other 2 were groaning, clutching their wounds. "Tie them up," Cyrus ordered the young hands. "We'll deal with them when the boss gets back." Norah lowered her rifle, her hands shaking. She'd just been in her first real gunfight. The reality of it hit her all at once. The violence, the blood, the fact that she could have died. But she hadn't, and neither had anyone else on the ranch. Finn returned 3 hours later, soot-stained and exhausted. The fire was out, the cattle safe. When he saw the 3 bound men in the yard, his expression went dark. "What happened?" Norah told him. Every detail. Finn listened, his jaw tight. When she finished, he walked over to the wounded men. "Who sent you?" he asked. None of them answered. Finn crouched down beside the one with the shoulder wound. "I'm going to ask you one more time. Who sent you?" "Go to hell," the man spat. Finn stood, his face cold. "Tom, ride to Prescott. Get the marshal. Tell him we've got 3 men here on charges of arson, attempted kidnapping, and assault. Let's see if Thornton can talk his way out of this." Tom nodded and rode off. Finn turned to Norah. You all right? I'm fine. You sure? I said I'm fine. Finn studied her for a moment, then nodded. Good shooting. It was the closest thing to praise she'd heard from him, and it settled something inside her. She'd proven herself, not just as a bookkeeper, as someone who could stand and fight when it mattered. That night, the ranch was silent. The hands were exhausted, sprawled in the bunkhouse, too tired to talk. Norah sat on her cabin steps, staring at the stars, her rifle across her knees. Finn found her there. He sat down beside her, saying nothing for a long time. Finally, Norah spoke. You think the marshal will arrest Thornton? If those men talk, maybe. If not, we'll have to keep fighting. How long can we keep this up? As long as it takes. Norah looked at him. You really don't quit, do you? No, I don't. She felt it then, that pull toward him, stronger than before. It wasn't just gratitude. It wasn't just respect. It was something deeper, something that scared her more than Thornton's guns ever could. Finn, she said quietly. He turned to her, and the way he looked at her, steady, unflinching, like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, made her breath catch. Yeah? She wanted to say it, wanted to tell him what she was feeling, but the words stuck in her throat, tangled up with years of fear and distrust. Thank you, she said instead. For everything. Finn nodded slowly. You don't have to thank me. I know, but I want to. They sat in silence, close but not touching, and Norah felt the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. She wondered if he felt it too, if he lay awake at night thinking about her the way she thought about him. But she didn't ask. Not yet. Because asking meant risking, and she'd spent so long protecting herself that she didn't know how to stop. The hearing was in 2 days. The marshal had arrived, questioned the wounded men, and promised a full investigation. Thornton hadn't been arrested yet, but the pressure was building. And Norah, standing on the porch of a ranch in the middle of the Arizona desert, realized something that shook her to her core. She didn't want to leave, not when this was over, not ever. She wanted to stay. The realization sat heavy in Norah's chest through the next morning as she packed for the trip to Prescott. She folded 2 dresses she rarely wore, the ones she'd kept from Boston because they were practical, not because she liked them. Her hands moved mechanically while her mind churned. Wanting to stay meant admitting she'd found something here worth keeping. It meant admitting she trusted Finn. And trust was the most dangerous thing she'd ever let herself feel. Finn knocked on her cabin door just after dawn. Ready? Almost. She buckled her saddlebag and slung it over her shoulder. Her rifle was already cleaned and loaded, propped beside the door. Hayes is meeting us at the courthouse. We'll stay at the hotel tonight. Hearings first thing tomorrow morning. Finn's voice was level, but she could see tension in the set of his shoulders. Tom and Cyrus are staying here with most of the hands. If Thornton tries anything while we're gone, they'll handle it. You think he will? I think he's desperate, and desperate men don't think straight. They rode out with 2 hands as escort, young men named Billy and Santos who'd proven themselves during the attack. The journey to Prescott took most of the day, the landscape gradually shifting from open desert to rolling hills dotted with juniper and pine. Norah had never been to the territorial capital before. As they crested the final ridge and the town came into view, she was struck by how different it looked from Copper Creek. Larger, more permanent, with brick buildings and actual streets instead of just dirt tracks. The courthouse sat at the center of town, a 2-story structure with white columns that looked like someone had tried to transplant a piece of the east out here, and it hadn't quite taken. The hotel was across the street, a respectable-looking place called the Palace. Finn got them rooms on the 2nd floor, then went to check in with Margaret Hayes while Norah cleaned up from the ride. She stood in front of the small mirror in her room, staring at her reflection. The woman looking back at her was sun-browned, lean, with calluses on her hands and a hardness in her eyes that hadn't been there 6 months ago. She looked like she belonged in the West now, like Boston was a dream that had happened to someone else. A knock interrupted her thoughts. "It's me," Finn called. She opened the door. He'd cleaned up, too, changed into a dark suit that made him look uncomfortable but distinguished. It occurred to Norah that she'd never seen him in anything but work clothes before. "Hayes wants to meet for dinner," he said. "Go over the strategy for tomorrow." "All right." They found Hayes in the hotel dining room, already seated at a corner table with her leather satchel beside her. She'd somehow made herself look even more severe, her gray hair pulled back so tight it seemed to stretch her skin. "Sit," she ordered, not bothering with pleasantries. "We don't have much time, and there's a lot to cover." A waitress brought coffee and stew. Hayes spread papers across the table between the plates, talking while she ate with ruthless efficiency. "I've identified the judge. His name is Howard Blackwell. He's fair, generally speaking, but he's also been in Thornton's pocket for land deals in the past. Nothing criminal, but enough to make him sympathetic to business interests." "So we're starting behind," Finn said. "We're starting where we always start, fighting uphill. But I've got ammunition." Hayes pulled out a thick folder. "I traced the Boston investment group financing Thornton's land purchases. 3 guesses who's a silent partner." "Edmund Carlyle," Norah said, her stomach sinking. "Got it in one. Your cousin's been buying up territory out here for over a year. Thornton's just his local operator. The plan was probably to grab your father's estate, then use that capital to build a cattle empire out west. You running complicated things, so now they're trying to eliminate you as an obstacle." "Can you prove the connection?" Finn asked. "I've got bank records, partnership agreements, correspondence. It's all circumstantial, but it paints a clear picture. The problem is jurisdiction. The judge tomorrow is only ruling on your legal status, Miss Bennett, whether you're competent to manage your own affairs. He's not going to care about investment schemes back east." "Then what's the point of bringing it up?" Norah asked. Context. "I'm going to argue that this entire proceeding is part of a conspiracy to defraud you of your inheritance, that Thornton and your cousin are working together to have you declared incompetent so they can seize your assets. That's a criminal matter, which means the judge has to take it seriously." Finn leaned back in his chair. "You think it'll work?" "I think it's our best shot. But I need you to be prepared, Miss Bennett. They're going to attack your character. They're going to bring up every unconventional thing you've ever done. Wearing men's clothes, traveling alone, refusing to marry. They're going to try to paint you as hysterical, irrational, unfit." "Let them try," Norah said quietly. Hayes smiled, sharp as a knife. "That's the spirit? Just remember, stay calm. Answer questions directly. Don't let them bait you into anger. The moment you lose your temper, you prove their point." They spent the next 2 hours going over testimony. Hayes drilled Norah on potential questions, making her practice answers until they were smooth and confident. Finn watched, occasionally interjecting with observations about how the ranch operated, how Norah had transformed the accounting system, how the hands respected her work. By the time they finished, it was late. The dining room had emptied. Norah's head ached from the concentration. "Get some rest," Hayes said, gathering her papers. "Tomorrow's going to be brutal." Finn walked Norah upstairs. They stopped outside her door. The hallway was dim, lit by a single oil lamp at the far end. "You're going to be fine tomorrow," Finn said. "You don't know that." "Yes, I do. You're the strongest person I've ever met, and I've known a lot of strong people." Norah looked at him, this man who'd bought her freedom and given her a life and asked for nothing in return except honest work. She wanted to tell him what she'd realized, that she didn't want to leave, that the thought of losing him, terrified her more than any courtroom. But the words wouldn't come. So instead she said, "Thank you for being here." "Where else would I be?" He said goodnight and went to his own room. Norah lay awake for hours, listening to the sounds of the town outside her window, trying to prepare herself for what was coming. The courthouse was packed by 8 the next morning. Word had spread about the hearing, and it seemed like half the territory had turned out to watch. Norah recognized some faces from Copper Creek. Others were strangers, drawn by curiosity or the promise of scandal. Thornton sat in the front row with 3 well-dressed men Norah assumed were his lawyers. He looked confident, almost bored, like the outcome was already decided. When he saw Norah enter with Finn and Hayes, his mouth curved into that oily smile. "Miss Bennett," he called across the room. "Looking forward to getting this all sorted out, for your own good, of course." Hayes grabbed Norah's arm before she could respond. "Don't," she hissed. "That's exactly what he wants." They took their seats. Judge Blackwell entered, a portly man with thinning hair and tired eyes. He banged his gavel, and the room quieted. "We're here to determine the mental competency of Miss Norah Bennett," he announced. "This is a civil proceeding, not a criminal trial. I'll hear arguments from both sides, review evidence, and make a ruling. Let's begin." Thornton's lead lawyer stood. His name was Silas Morton, and he had the smooth polish of a man who'd never done a day of manual labor in his life. He laid out the case methodically. Nora's flight from Boston, her refusal to accept her cousin's guardianship, her unconventional behavior, the medical certificate from Dr. Prescott declaring her unstable. "This is a woman," Morton said, his voice dripping with false sympathy, "who has consistently demonstrated an inability to function within the normal bounds of society. She dresses as a man. She carries weapons. She has no husband, no family support, no structure to her life. These are not the actions of a rational person. These are the actions of someone who needs help, someone who needs guidance." He went on for 20 minutes, building a picture of Norah as a pitiable creature too damaged to make her own decisions. By the time he sat down, several people in the gallery were nodding in agreement. Then it was Hayes's turn. She stood slowly, like a gunslinger getting ready to draw. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Your Honor, this entire proceeding is a farce. It's not about Miss Bennett's mental state. It's about money. It's about a corrupt man in Boston who wants to steal his cousin's inheritance, and a corrupt man here in Arizona who's helping him do it." Morton shot to his feet. "Objection! That's a baseless accusation." "Is it?" Hayes pulled out her folder. "Because I have bank records here showing that Mr. Richard Thornton has received substantial payments from a Boston investment group controlled by Edmund Carlisle. I have correspondence between them discussing Miss Bennett's problematic independence. I have evidence of a conspiracy to defraud a woman of her rightful inheritance by having her falsely declared incompetent." The courtroom erupted. Judge Blackwell banged his gavel repeatedly. "Order! Order in this court!" Hayes continued, relentless. "The medical certificate submitted as evidence is a forgery. Dr. Prescott is known to sign whatever Mr. Carlisle pays him to sign. The law firm on the letterhead doesn't exist. None of this is legitimate. It's theater designed to give Mr. Thornton legal cover to seize Miss Bennett and ship her back east where her cousin can control her assets." "These are serious allegations," Blackwell said, his tired eyes suddenly sharp. "Do you have proof?" "I have documentation, Your Honor, all of which I'm prepared to submit for the record." Morton was sweating now. "Your Honor, this is irrelevant to the matter at hand." "On the contrary," Hayes said, "it's entirely relevant. You can't determine Miss Bennett's competency without understanding the motives of the people questioning it, and those motives are purely financial." Blackwell studied the documents Hayes handed him. The courtroom was dead silent. Norah could hear her own heartbeat. Finally, the judge looked up. "Mr. Morton, I'm going to ask you directly. Did you or your client know about this financial arrangement between Mr. Thornton and Mr. Carlisle?" Morton opened his mouth, closed it. I was not made aware of the full details." "That's a yes." Blackwell's expression hardened. "Miss Hayes, I want to hear from Miss Bennett herself. Can she speak on her own behalf?" "She can, Your Honor." Hayes gestured to Norah. She stood, her legs unsteady, and walked to the witness chair. The clerk swore her in. She placed her hand on the Bible and promised to tell the truth. And then she was sitting in front of the entire courtroom with everyone staring at her. Hayes approached. "Miss Bennett, can you tell the court why you left Boston?" Norah took a breath. "My father died. He left me his estate. My cousin Edmund wanted control of it. When I refused, he had me evaluated by a doctor he paid. The doctor said I was hysterical. Edmund tried to have me committed, so I left." "And came west?" "Yes." "Why the frontier?" "Because it was the only place I thought I could be free." Hayes nodded. "Tell me about your work at the Triple M Ranch." Norah described her job. The ledgers, the accounts, the supply orders. She explained how she'd reorganized the entire system, created new tracking methods, improved profitability. Hayes had her walk through specific examples, demonstrating her competence with numbers and business. Then Morton stood for cross-examination. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Bennett, isn't it true that you've been arrested for public indecency?" "I was arrested for wearing trousers, yes." "And you were subsequently sold at auction, like a criminal?" "I was auctioned because the town had a barbaric law. That doesn't make me incompetent. But it does suggest an inability to conform to social expectations, doesn't it? It suggests that social expectations are sometimes wrong." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Morton's smile tightened. "You carry a rifle everywhere you go. You've been involved in armed confrontations. Does that seem like the behavior of a stable woman? It seems like the behavior of a woman who wants to protect herself, especially when men like Mr. Thornton send armed thugs to kidnap her. More murmurs. Morton was losing ground, and he knew it. Your Honor, he tried. This woman has repeatedly demonstrated— I've heard enough, Blackwell interrupted. He looked at Norah. Miss Bennett, do you believe you're competent to manage your own affairs? Yes, Your Honor, I do. And Mr. Morgan, you're the one who employs Miss Bennett? Finn stood. Yes, Your Honor. Tell me honestly, is she capable of the work you've assigned her? She's the best bookkeeper I've ever had. The ranch runs smoother now than it has in 5 years. And her behavior? Her manner of dress? Does that concern you? No, Your Honor. I care whether she does her job. She does. Everything else is her own business. Blackwell leaned back in his chair, thinking. The entire courtroom held its breath. I'm going to make a ruling, he said finally, and I want it on the record that I don't appreciate having my time wasted with fraudulent documentation and conspiracy schemes. He looked at Morton. Your case is dismissed. The medical certificate is clearly fraudulent. The guardianship claim has no legal standing in this territory. Miss Bennett is hereby declared legally competent and independent. Relief flooded through Norah so suddenly her vision blurred. Furthermore, Blackwell continued, I'm referring this matter to the territorial marshal for investigation. If Mr. Thornton and Mr. Carlyle have engaged in conspiracy to defraud, they'll answer for it. He banged his gavel. This proceeding is concluded. The courtroom erupted again, but this time with different energy. People were talking, arguing, pointing. Thornton's face had gone dark red. He stood abruptly and stormed out, his lawyers scrambling after him. Hayes turned to Norah, and for the first time she was smiling. Actually smiling. Well done, she said simply. Finn was suddenly there, his hand on Norah's shoulder. You all right? She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She'd won. After everything, after months of running and fighting and being afraid, she'd actually won. They left the courthouse together, stepping out into bright sunlight. People were still streaming out, still talking about the hearing. Norah saw some of them looking at her differently now, not with mockery or pity, with something almost like respect. We should get back to the ranch, Finn said. Make sure everything's all right. Agreed, Hayes said, but I'm not done. I'm going to keep digging into Carlyle's operations. If he's breaking territorial law, I want him prosecuted. I'll send word when I have more. She shook Norah's hand, a firm, brief grip. Then she climbed into her buggy and rode off, already absorbed in the papers scattered across the seat beside her. Finn and Norah stood on the courthouse steps, the town bustling around them. Norah felt strange, unmoored. She'd been fighting for so long that she didn't know what to do now that the fight was over. You hungry? Finn asked. Starving. They found a small restaurant and ate lunch in relative silence, both of them processing what had just happened. Billy and Santos joined them, grinning like fools. That was something, Billy said. Never seen a woman tear into lawyers like that. Miss Hayes is terrifying. She's effective, Finn corrected. There's a difference. They finished eating and prepared to ride back. Norah changed into her traveling clothes, strapping on her gun belt and rifle. She felt more herself in these clothes than she ever had in the dresses Edmund had insisted she wear. The ride back was long and hot, but Norah barely noticed. Her mind was elsewhere, spinning through everything that had happened. She was free. Actually, legally free. Edmund couldn't touch her. Thornton couldn't touch her. She could stay at the ranch, keep working, build a life. The thought should have been thrilling. Instead, it was terrifying, because now she had to make a choice. She had to decide what she wanted, and what she wanted was sitting on a horse 3 feet away from her, quiet and solid and infuriatingly unreadable. They reached the ranch just before sunset. Tom met them in the yard, relief obvious on his weathered face. How'd it go? We won, Finn said simply. Tom let out a whoop and slapped his hat against his leg. About damn time something went right. Any trouble here? Quiet as a graveyard. If Thornton's planning something, it hasn't shown up yet. That night, after everyone had settled in and the celebration had died down, Norah found herself alone in her cabin again. She sat on the edge of her bed, the weight of the day pressing down on her. She'd achieved what she'd set out to do. She was free, but freedom felt different than she'd expected. It felt like standing at the edge of something vast and uncertain, with no map to guide her. A soft knock on her door. She opened it to find Finn standing there, hat in hand. "Can I come in?" "Of course." He stepped inside, looking around at the small space like he was seeing it for the first time. Norah suddenly felt self-conscious about how sparse it was. Just a bed, a chair, her rifle on the wall, nothing that made it feel like home. "I wanted to talk to you," Finn said, "about what happens next." Nora's heart kicked in her chest. "All right, the hearing's over. You're legally free, which means you can go wherever you want, do whatever you want." He paused, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain. "I'm not going to assume you want to stay here." "What if I do?" The question hung between them. Finn's gray eyes searched her face. "Then you're welcome to stay, for as long as you want. The job's yours if you want it. The cabin's yours. Everything we agreed to, it stands." "Just the job?" Finn went very still. "What do you mean?" Norah took a breath. This was it. The moment she either took the risk or spent the rest of her life wondering what might have been. "I mean, is that all this is to you? Just a business arrangement?" "No." The word came out rough, like he'd been holding it back for weeks. "No, it's not." "Then what is it?" Finn stepped closer. "It's me trying not to take advantage of someone who's been through hell. It's me trying to do the right thing, even when it's the last thing I want to do." "And what do you want to do?" He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I want to ask you to stay. Not as my bookkeeper, as more than that. But I can't ask that. Not after everything. You've spent your whole life with men trying to control you. I won't be another one." Nora's chest felt tight. "What if I'm asking you?" "Norah, I'm asking." She stepped closer to him. "I'm asking because I'm tired of running. I'm tired of being afraid. And I've spent weeks trying to convince myself that what I feel for you is just gratitude or relief or anything but what it actually is." "And what is it?" "I don't know. I've never felt it before. But it's big and it's scary and it keeps me awake at night." She forced herself to hold his gaze. "I want to stay. Not because I have nowhere else to go. Because I want to be here. With you." For a long moment, Finn didn't move. Then he reached out and cupped her face with one rough, calloused hand. The touch was gentle, uncertain, like he was afraid she might break. "You're sure?" he asked quietly. "I'm sure." He kissed her. It was nothing like the practiced, aggressive kisses she'd endured from men in Boston who thought they owned her. It was careful and real, and it felt like coming home after being lost for years. When they finally pulled apart, Finn rested his forehead against hers. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. I'm not good at this." "Neither am I." "Then we'll figure it out together." They stood like that for a long time, holding on to each other in the dim lamplight, and Norah felt something inside her finally settle, like a piece that had been missing her entire life had just clicked into place. The next morning, the ranch woke to news that spread faster than wildfire. Richard Thornton had been arrested in Prescott. The territorial marshal had moved quickly once Judge Blackwell referred the case, and by dawn, Thornton was in custody on charges of conspiracy to commit fraud, arson, and attempted kidnapping. Tom brought the news back from town, barely able to contain his grin. Marshall found 2 of Thornton's men willing to talk, gave him up in exchange for lighter sentences, said Thornton paid them to burn the grass and grab you, got it all on record. Finn absorbed this with a nod. "And Carlisle?" "Marshall's putting in a request to Boston authorities. Don't know if they'll act on it, but at least there's a paper trail now. It wasn't perfect justice. Edmund was still out there, still dangerous, but it was something, and for now, it was enough." The hands celebrated that night with whiskey and stories around the fire. Norah sat beside Finn, their shoulders touching, and listened to the men trade tall tales and crude jokes. She felt the weight of their acceptance, hard-won and genuine. These men would stand with her. They'd proven it. Cyrus raised his cup in a toast. "To Miss Norah, the toughest bookkeeper in the territory." "Hear, hear," the men chorused. Norah felt her face heat. "I just did what needed doing." "You did more than that," Tom said. "You stood your ground. Most people would have run. You didn't." "I had help." "Sure you did. But help don't mean nothing if you ain't willing to fight for yourself." The party continued late into the night. Eventually, people started drifting off to bed. worn out from the long week. Norah walked back to her cabin with Finn beside her. "You all right?" he asked. "Better than all right." They stopped outside her door. Finn looked down at her, and she saw something in his expression that made her pulse quicken. "Can I stay?" he asked. Yes. He followed her inside. They lay together on the narrow bed, fully clothed, just holding each other in the darkness. It was the most intimate thing Norah had ever experienced, this simple act of being close to someone without fear or expectation. "I never thought I'd have this," she whispered. "What?" "This feeling, like I belong somewhere, like I'm not alone." Finn's arms tightened around her. "You're not alone, not anymore." She fell asleep like that, safe and warm, and didn't dream at all. The weeks that followed were the most peaceful Norah had known since childhood. She fell into a rhythm at the ranch, working through the accounts in the morning, helping with whatever needed doing in the afternoon. The hands had stopped treating her like a curiosity and started treating her like one of them. She learned to rope cattle, mend fences, even break a horse that Tom swore was unrideable. The horse threw her 4 times before she got it right. But she got it right. Her relationship with Finn deepened gradually, naturally, like a river finding its course. They didn't rush. They'd both been alone too long to know how to do this quickly, but they learned each other slowly, carefully, building trust through 1,000 small moments. 2 months after the hearing, a letter arrived from Margaret Hayes. She'd uncovered evidence that Edmund Carlisle had been embezzling from his business partners in Boston. The authorities there were building a case against him. It would take time, but Hayes was confident he'd face prosecution. "He's going to lose everything," Norah said, reading the letter for the 3rd time. "Good," Finn said simply. "It feels strange. I spent so long being afraid of him, and now he's just a man facing consequences. That's all he ever was. You were the one who made him powerful by being afraid, and now I'm not." "No, now you're not." That night, lying in bed with Finn beside her, Norah thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago. Desperate, running, terrified of every shadow. She barely recognized that woman now. The frontier had hardened her in some ways, but it had also freed her in ways she was only beginning to understand. She thought about the auction platform in Copper Creek, about the moment Finn had stepped forward with his impossible offer, about the choice she'd made to follow him instead of riding off alone. Every choice since had led her here. To this moment, to this life. And for the first time in her entire life, Norah Bennett felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The peace lasted 3 weeks. Norah was in the office reviewing supply invoices when Tom burst through the door, his face flushed and his hat askew. She looked up, immediately alert. Tom never rushed anywhere. "What's wrong?" "Ryder just came in from Prescott. Thornton made bail." The pen slipped from Norah's fingers. "What?" "Posted bond yesterday. Judge set it high, but someone put up the money. He's out." Finn appeared in the doorway behind Tom, his expression dark. "Who paid?" "Don't know yet. Ryder said the clerk wouldn't say. Just that it was a substantial sum, paid in cash." Norah's stomach twisted. "Edmund." "That'd be my guess," Finn said. "Your cousin's got reason to want Thornton on the street. Man's his only connection out here." "So what do we do?" Finn's jaw tightened. "We prepare. Tom, double the watch. No one works alone. Everyone stays armed. If Thornton shows his face on this property, I want to know about it immediately." "Yes, sir." Tom hurried out. Norah stood, her hands curling into fists. "He's not going to just let this go, is he?" "No. Men like Thornton, they don't know how to lose. They just get meaner." Finn crossed to the window looking out at the ranch. "He's facing serious charges: conspiracy, arson, attempted kidnapping. He's looking at years in prison if he's convicted. That makes him dangerous." "You think he'll run?" "I think he'll try to settle scores first." The words hung heavy in the room. Norah felt the fragile peace she'd built over the past weeks crack down the middle. She'd let herself believe it was over, let herself start thinking about a future instead of just survival. Now that future felt uncertain again. Finn turned to her. "I need you to promise me something." "What?" "If things go bad, if Thornton comes here with men and guns, I need you to promise you'll get on your horse and ride. Don't try to fight, just go." I'm not running. Norah. He crossed to her, gripping her shoulders. I can't lose you. I won't. So promise me, if it comes to that, you'll save yourself. She looked into his eyes and saw real fear there. Maybe the first time she'd ever seen him afraid. It shook something loose inside her. I promise, she said quietly. But only if you promise the same. No hero nonsense. We both get out, or neither of us does. Finn's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Deal. But they both knew it was a promise neither of them would keep if it came down to it. The next 2 days passed in tense anticipation. The hands moved around the ranch like soldiers expecting an attack, rifles close, eyes scanning the horizon. Norah tried to focus on work, but found herself constantly looking up from the ledgers, listening for the sound of approaching horses. On the third day, a letter arrived. It was addressed to Finn, delivered by a nervous-looking boy from town who wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. Finn opened it standing in the yard, Norah and Tom flanking him. His expression went cold as he read. What does it say? Norah asked. Finn handed her the letter. The handwriting was neat, almost elegant. Morgan, you've made yourself a nuisance. I'm willing to let bygones be bygones if you're reasonable. Sell me water rights to your creek at fair market value, and I'll drop the whole matter. The woman can stay at your ranch. I won't interfere. But if you refuse, I promise you'll regret it. You have 3 days to decide. R. Thornton. Norah looked up. He's trying to buy you off. That's what it looks like. What are you going to do? Finn took the letter back and held it up to the sunlight, studying it. I'm going to ignore it. Man's out on bail facing criminal charges. He's got no leverage. This is a bluff. You sure about that? Tom asked. No, but I'm not selling my water to a snake like Thornton, regardless. He walked into the house and threw the letter in the stove. Norah followed, her heart pounding. Finn, what if it's not a bluff? Then we deal with it. But I don't negotiate with men who threaten me on my own land. He turned to face her. I know you're scared. I am too. But we can't live under a cloud of threats. At some point, you have to stand your ground or you'll spend your whole life running. I'm not scared of standing my ground. I'm scared of losing you. The admission came out before she could stop it. Finn's expression softened. You won't lose me. I'm too stubborn to get killed by a two-bit saloon owner. Don't joke about this. I'm not joking. I'm just not going to live my life afraid. He took her hands. We've been afraid long enough, don't you think? She wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him that bravery without caution was just stupidity, but she also knew he was right. They couldn't spend every day waiting for the other shoe to drop. Fine, she said. But if he comes here, I'm fighting. I don't care what I promised. I know you are. I wouldn't expect anything else. 3 days passed. Nothing happened. On the 4th day, Tom rode into town to check on the situation and came back with interesting news. Thornton's saloon is closed, been shut for 2 days. Neighbors say he cleared out, took everything valuable, left in the middle of the night. Finn frowned. He ran? Looks like it. Marshall's got a warrant out now. Skipping bail, that's a hanging offense. Norah felt dizzy with relief. So it's over? Maybe. Or maybe he's just regrouping. Tom shifted in his saddle. But there's more. Got word from Hayes. She says Edmund Carlisle was arrested in Boston 3 days ago. Embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy. They're holding him without bail. The world seemed to tilt. Norah grabbed the fence post to steady herself. Edmund's in jail? Hayes says the prosecutor's case is solid. He's looking at 20 years minimum. 20 years. Edmund would be an old man when he got out, if he got out at all. The cousin who'd controlled her life, who'd tried to have her committed, who'd sent Thornton after her, he was done. I need to sit down, Norah said faintly. Finn guided her to the porch steps. She sat heavily, her mind reeling. It was too much, too fast. Thornton gone. Edmund arrested. Everything she'd been fighting against for months, suddenly just over. You all right? Finn asked, sitting beside her. I don't know. I thought I'd feel different. Relieved, maybe. But I just feel empty. That's normal. You've been running on fear and anger for so long. Now that it's gone, you don't know what to do with yourself. How do you know that? Because I felt the same way when the claim jumpers were dealt with. Spent so long fighting, I forgot what it felt like to just live. Norah leaned against him, letting his solidity anchor her. What do we do now? Whatever we want. That's the whole point of freedom. isn't it? The words settled over her like a blanket. Whatever they wanted. The concept felt foreign and enormous at the same time. That evening, the ranch hands threw an impromptu celebration. Someone produced a fiddle. Someone else had hidden away a bottle of decent whiskey. The men danced and sang and made fools of themselves, and Norah watched from the porch steps, Finn beside her, and felt something warm spread through her chest. "They're happy for you," Finn said. "They're happy the threat's gone. That's different." "No, it's not. You're part of this ranch now. What affects you affects all of us." Billy stumbled over, drunk and grinning. "Miss Norah! You gotta dance. Can't have a celebration without the Lady of Honor." "I don't dance." "Sure you do. Everyone dances. Come on." He grabbed her hand and pulled her into the firelight before she could protest. The fiddle player struck up a reel, and suddenly Norah was being spun around by a series of hands, passed from partner to partner, laughing despite herself. She was a terrible dancer, clumsy and offbeat, but no one seemed to care. They were just happy. When the dance finally ended, she was breathless and dizzy. Finn caught her as she stumbled, steadying her with a rare smile. "See? You can dance." "Barely. Good enough." The celebration wound down slowly. Eventually, the hands drifted off to the bunkhouse, leaving just Finn and Norah by the dying fire. "I've been thinking," Finn said. "About?" "About us. About what happens next." Norah's stomach fluttered. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're free now. Really free. No one's chasing you. You could go anywhere, do anything, and I don't want you to feel like you have to stay here just because of what we've been through." "Is that what you think? That I'm only here because I'm grateful?" "I think you've never had a real choice before, and now you do. I want you to make it with a clear head, not because you feel obligated." Norah turned to face him fully. "Finn Morgan, you're the most frustrating man I've ever met." "What?" "I told you I wanted to stay. I told you how I felt. And you keep giving me outs like you're expecting me to take one. Do you want me to leave?" "No, that's the last thing I want." "Then stop asking. I'm staying because this is where I want to be, not because I'm grateful, not because I'm scared, because I choose this. I choose you." Finn stared at her, and she watched something shift in his expression, like he'd been holding his breath for weeks and finally allowed himself to exhale. "Marry me," he said. Nora's heart stopped. "What?" "Marry me. Not because you have to, not because it's proper or expected, but because I love you and I want to build a life with you, a real one." The words hit her like a physical force. Marriage. She'd spent so long seeing it as a trap, a cage that men used to control women. But the way Finn said it, the way he looked at her, it didn't sound like a trap at all. It sounded like a promise. "I don't know how to be a wife," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know how to be a husband. We'll figure it out together. I'm not good at being what people expect." "I don't want you to be what people expect. I want you to be yourself. That's all I've ever wanted." Norah felt tears prick her eyes. She'd cried more in the past few months than she had in years, and she wasn't sure if she liked it. But these tears felt different, lighter. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." Finn kissed her, gentle and sure, and the last of Nora's walls came tumbling down. She'd spent her whole life protecting herself, building barriers to keep people out. But with Finn, she didn't need them. With him, she could just be. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch. Margaret Hayes came from Tucson, looking pleased with herself in a severe gray dress. The ranch hands stood as witnesses, scrubbed clean and uncomfortable in their Sunday clothes. There was no preacher. The nearest one was 2 days' ride away, so Judge Blackwell agreed to perform the ceremony, making the long trip from Prescott for what he called the first decent thing to come out of this whole mess. Norah wore a simple blue dress that Hayes had helped her pick out in Prescott. It wasn't anything fancy, but it fit well and she could move in it, which was more than she could say for most dresses. She'd braided her hair and tucked wildflowers into it, a suggestion from Tom that had made her laugh until she realized he was serious. Finn wore his dark suit, the same one from the hearing. He looked uncomfortable but determined, like he was facing down something more dangerous than any gunfight. Blackwell read from a worn book of territorial statutes, the closest thing he had to a ceremony script. "Marriage in the Arizona Territory," he intoned, "is a contract between two consenting adults. It requires honesty, respect, and the willingness to work together through hardship. Do you, Finn Morgan, take this woman as your wife, to be your partner in all things? I do. And do you, Norah Bennett, take this man as your husband, to be your partner in all things? Norah looked at Finn, at the man who'd bought her freedom and given her a life and asked for nothing in return except that she be herself. I do. Then by the authority granted to me by the territory of Arizona, I declare you married. You may kiss if you're so inclined. Finn kissed her, brief and chaste, and the hands erupted in cheers. Someone fired a gun in the air. Someone else started the fiddle again. The celebration that followed was loud and chaotic and perfect. Hayes pulled Norah aside later when the dancing had started. You did well, she said simply. Thank you for everything. I wouldn't have made it through the hearing without you. You would have. You're stronger than you think. Hayes handed her a sealed envelope. This came for you yesterday, from Boston. Norah opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a letter from her father's old attorney, a man named Preston, who'd never been on Edmund's payroll. The letter was brief and businesslike. Edmund's assets had been seized by the court. The bulk of her father's estate, which Edmund had been controlling illegally, was being returned to her. She was, the letter informed her, quite wealthy. I don't want it, Norah said immediately. Don't be stupid, it's your money, your father's legacy. Use it for something good. Like what? Like anything you want. Build a school, start a hospital, expand the ranch, or just put it in a bank and forget about it. But don't let Edmund's crimes take it away from you a second time. Norah folded the letter carefully. Hayes was right. The money was hers, earned by her father's work, stolen by Edmund's greed. Taking it back wasn't about wealth. It was about justice. I'll think about it, she said. Hayes nodded, satisfied. Good. Now go dance with your husband. You've earned a moment of peace. Norah found Finn near the fire, talking with Tom about the fall cattle drive. She slipped her hand into his and he squeezed it gently. Everything all right? He asked. Better than all right. I'll tell you later. They danced until the fire burned low and the hands started stumbling off to bed. Then Finn led Norah to the main house, to the bedroom they'd share now, and closed the door behind them. Nervous? He asked. Terrified. Me too. They undressed slowly, carefully, learning each other's bodies with the same patient attention they'd used for everything else. It wasn't smooth or practiced. It was awkward and fumbling and real. And when it was over, Norah lay in Finn's arms and felt more complete than she ever had in her life. I love you, she said into the darkness. I love you too. They fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time in years, Norah didn't have nightmares. The next week settled into a new rhythm. Norah moved her things from the cabin into the main house, combining her sparse belongings with Finn's. She continued managing the books, but now she also helped make decisions about the ranch's future. Where to expand, what cattle to buy, which hands to hire for the fall drive. She wrote to Preston in Boston and instructed him to liquidate her father's estate and transfer the funds to a territorial bank. The amount, when it finally arrived, was staggering, more money than the ranch made in 5 years. What do you want to do with it? Finn asked, looking at the bank statement. I was thinking, what if we use some of it to expand, buy more land, build better facilities, maybe even start breeding horses? That's ambitious. You got a problem with ambitious? Finn smiled, not even a little. They spent the next month planning. Tom helped scout potential land parcels. Cyrus suggested improvements to the bunkhouse and barn. Billy, who turned out to have a surprising head for numbers, worked with Norah on financial projections. One evening, Norah was reviewing contracts when Finn came into the office, looking thoughtful. There's something we should talk about, he said. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, but I got word from town. Thornton's saloon is being auctioned off to pay his debts, and I was thinking, what if we bought it? Norah blinked. The saloon? Why? Because Copper Creek needs something better than a gambling hall. What if we turned it into a proper business? A general store maybe, or a hotel. Something that serves the whole community, not just the drunks and gamblers. That would cost a fortune. We've got a fortune now. Might as well use it for something that matters. Norah considered this. The idea of buying Thornton's saloon, the place where he'd plotted against her and turning it into something good, there was a certain poetry to it. "All right," she said, "let's do it." They bought the saloon for a fraction of what Thornton had paid for it. The auction was sparsely attended, and no one wanted to be associated with a building that carried so much bad history. Finn and Norah gutted the interior, ripped out the bar and gambling tables, and rebuilt it as a general store with a small hotel on the second floor. The people of Copper Creek watched with wary curiosity. Some whispered that it was unseemly for a woman to own property in town. Others muttered that the Morgans were getting too big for their britches. But when the store opened, clean and well-stocked with fair prices, the complaints died down. Norah hired a woman named Clara to run it, a widow with 3 children who needed work. Clara was sharp and honest, and within a month, the store was turning a profit. "You're good at this," Finn observed one evening as they reviewed the store's accounts. "At what?" "Building things. Seeing what could be instead of just what is." "I learned from you." "No, you didn't. This is all you." Norah felt a flush of pride. She'd spent so long being told she was too difficult, too independent, too much. But here, in this harsh frontier territory, those qualities were assets. She was building something real, something that mattered. In late autumn, a letter arrived from Margaret Hayes. Edmund had been convicted on all counts and sentenced to 25 years in prison. His assets had been seized. His reputation was destroyed. He would die in a cell, forgotten and alone. Norah read the letter twice, waiting to feel something: triumph, satisfaction, relief. But all she felt was tired. "Is it wrong that I don't care?" she asked Finn. "No, he doesn't deserve your energy anymore. I spent so long being afraid of him, and now he's just gone, like he never mattered at all." "Maybe he didn't. Maybe you mattered more than you realized, and he was just an obstacle you had to get past." Norah folded the letter and set it aside. Finn was right. Edmund was finished, and she was just beginning. Winter came hard that year, with snow in the high country and bitter winds that howled across the desert. The ranch hunkered down, the hands keeping close to the buildings. The cattle moved to sheltered valleys. Norah and Finn spent long evenings by the fire, planning for spring, talking about the future. One night, curled against Finn's chest, Norah said, "I want to start a school." "What?" "A school. For the kids in the territory. Most of them can't read, can't write. They're going to grow up with nothing unless someone teaches them." Finn was quiet for a moment. "That's a big undertaking." "I know, but we've got the money, and I've got the time. I could teach them myself until we find a real teacher." "You want to be a school teacher?" "I want to be useful. I want to do something that matters." Finn kissed the top of her head. "Then let's do it." They spent the winter planning. By spring, they'd purchased land near Copper Creek and begun construction on a small schoolhouse. It was a simple building, just one room with benches and a wood stove, but it was solid and clean, and it had big windows that let in the light. The school opened in early summer. 15 children showed up the first day, wide-eyed and nervous. Norah stood in front of them, her heart pounding, and realized she had no idea what she was doing. But she started anyway. She taught them letters and numbers. She taught them to read using newspapers and the Bible, the only books most families owned. She taught them geography using hand-drawn maps and history through stories of the territory's founding. The children were difficult. Some couldn't sit still. Others were so far behind they could barely spell their own names. But they were hungry to learn, and that hunger kept Norah going even on the days when she wanted to quit. Finn helped when he could, teaching the older boys practical skills like mathematics for accounting and measurements for building. Tom came by once a week to teach them about animal husbandry. Even Cyrus limped in occasionally to share stories about the territory's history. The school became something more than just a building. It became a gathering place, a symbol that Copper Creek was changing from a rough frontier town into something permanent, something worth investing in. One afternoon in late summer, Norah was cleaning the schoolhouse when Clara from the general store appeared in the doorway, looking nervous. "Mrs. Morgan, can I talk to you?" "Of course. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I wanted to thank you for giving me a chance, for the job, for—" She trailed off, tears in her eyes. "After my husband died, I thought we'd starve, or I'd have to do things I didn't want to do. But you gave me a way to support my children with dignity. I'll never forget that. Norah felt her own throat tighten. You earned it, Clara. You're good at what you do. Maybe. But you're the one who gave me the opportunity. Not many would have done that for a widow with no connections. After Clara left, Norah sat in the empty schoolhouse and cried. Not from sadness, from the overwhelming realization that she'd become the kind of person she'd always needed when she was desperate and alone. She'd become someone who helped. That evening, she told Finn about it. He listened quietly, then said, You know what you've done, don't you? What? You've built a life that matters. Not just for you, for everyone around you. That's rare. I had help. Sure, but you're the one who saw what needed doing and did it. That's all you. Norah leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, and thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, desperate, angry, running from everything. That woman felt like a stranger now. The fall brought news that Thornton had been caught near the Mexican border. He'd been living rough, hiding in mining camps and border towns. The territorial marshal brought him back in chains, and this time there was no bail. His trial was swift and brutal. The evidence was overwhelming, the witnesses credible. He was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 20 years hard labor. Norah attended the sentencing with Finn. She sat in the courtroom and watched Thornton shuffle in, diminished and defeated, and felt absolutely nothing. He wasn't a monster anymore. He was just a small, petty man who'd made bad choices and would pay for them. Outside the courthouse, Hayes was waiting. How do you feel? She asked. Empty, Norah admitted. I thought I'd feel vindicated, but I just feel tired. That's because revenge isn't as satisfying as people think. Justice is just the end of a bad chapter. The real satisfaction comes from what you do next. And what do I do next? Hayes smiled. Whatever you want. That's the whole point. Norah rode back to the ranch with Finn as the sun set over the desert, painting everything in shades of gold and red. The Triple M spread out before them, familiar and solid, and Norah realized she didn't need to do anything next. She was already doing it, living, building, loving. That night, lying in bed beside Finn, she said, I'm happy. Yeah? Yeah, really happy. Is that strange? Why would it be strange? Because I spent so long just trying to survive. I forgot what it felt like to actually live. Finn pulled her closer. You're living now. That's all that matters. Norah closed her eyes and let herself believe it. She was living. She was free. And for the first time in her entire life, she wasn't afraid of what came next. Winter passed into spring, and with it came the kind of change that settles into your bones without you noticing until it's already there. Norah woke one morning in early March feeling different. Not sick, exactly, just off. She dismissed it as exhaustion from helping birth a difficult calf the night before, but when the feeling persisted through the next week, she started to suspect. She was pregnant. The realization hit her while she was teaching fractions to a group of squirming 10-year-olds. One of them asked a question and she opened her mouth to answer, and suddenly the room tilted. She gripped the edge of her desk, breathing through the wave of nausea, and knew with absolute certainty what was happening to her body. That evening, she told Finn. They were in the barn checking on the new foals when she just blurted it out. I think I'm pregnant. Finn dropped the brush he was holding. It clattered against the floor. You think? I'm pretty sure. All the signs are there. I wanted to tell you before I went to see the doctor in Prescott. Finn stared at her, and for a long moment he didn't say anything. Norah's stomach twisted. They'd never talked about children, never planned for this. What if he didn't want it? What if this changed everything between them? Then he crossed to her and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. A baby, he said, his voice rough. We're having a baby. You're not upset? Upset? Norah, He pulled back to look at her, and his eyes were wet. She'd never seen him cry before. I never thought I'd have this. A wife, a family. I thought I'd die alone on this ranch. And now, Now you're stuck with me and a screaming infant, Norah finished, trying to lighten the moment, even though her own eyes were burning. Best thing that ever happened to me, Finn said simply. The pregnancy was confirmed a week later by Dr. Adelaide Chen, a stern Chinese woman who'd set up practice in Prescott and quickly become known as the best physician in the territory. She examined Norah with brisk efficiency, asked pointed questions about her health, and finally nodded. You're about 2 months along, healthy so far. You'll need to take it easier, though. No more breaking horses or chasing cattle. I don't break horses, Norah protested. Your husband says otherwise. Norah shot Finn a look. He shrugged, unrepentant. Dr. Chen continued, ignoring the byplay. Come back in a month. Sooner if there's bleeding or severe pain. Eat well. Rest when you can. And for heaven's sake, stop teaching yourself. Hire someone. I can't just stop. You can and you will. Unless you want to lose this baby. Dr. Chen's expression softened slightly. I've delivered hundreds of babies, Mrs. Morgan. The ones who survive have mothers who listen to me. Be one of them. Norah swallowed hard. All right, I'll find someone to take over. Finding a replacement teacher proved harder than expected. Most people in the territory who could read and write were too busy surviving to teach children. Norah was about to give up and just reduce her hours when Clara came to her with a suggestion. What about Mrs. Patterson? She used to teach back in Philadelphia, lost her husband to consumption, and came west to start over. She's been working as a seamstress, but I know she misses teaching. Mrs. Patterson turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, with silver hair and a no-nonsense demeanor that reminded Norah of Margaret Hayes. She visited the school, observed Norah teaching for a day, and agreed to take over. These children need structure, she said, and consistency. You've done well getting them started, but they need someone who can be here every day without distraction. I wasn't distracted. You're building a ranch empire and growing a human. That's distraction enough. Mrs. Patterson smiled, taking the sting out of her words. Let me do this. You've given me an opportunity when I had none. I won't waste it. Norah stepped back from teaching, and it was harder than she expected. She'd grown attached to the children, to the routine, to feeling useful. But as her belly grew and her energy flagged, she had to admit Dr. Chen was right. Growing a baby took more out of her than she'd anticipated. She turned her attention to the ranch, working with Tom and Cyrus on spring planning. The expansion they'd started the previous year was paying off. They'd bought 3 adjoining parcels and increased their herd by a third. The Triple M was becoming one of the largest operations in the territory, and with that came new challenges. We need more hands, Tom said one evening, reviewing the work schedule. We're stretched too thin. One man gets sick, and the whole operation backs up. How many more? Finn asked. 4, maybe 5. Good men, not drifters. People we can count on. Hiring proved difficult. Word had spread about the Triple M's success, but also about Norah's involvement. Some men refused to work on a ranch where a woman had authority. Others came for the wrong reasons, thinking a woman boss meant easy work. Tom ran off 3 potential hires in the first week for disrespecting Norah in front of the other hands. Finally, they found their crew. 2 brothers from Texas, Miguel and Carlos Reyes, who'd worked cattle their whole lives and didn't care who signed the paychecks as long as they were fair. A quiet man named James Fletcher, who'd been a buffalo hunter until the herds dried up. And a young kid, barely 18, named David Harris, who worked twice as hard as anyone to prove himself. The new hands integrated slowly. There were the usual tensions, the testing of boundaries, the figuring out of hierarchy. But Tom and Cyrus kept things under control, and by summer, the ranch was running smoother than it ever had. Norah's pregnancy progressed. Her belly swelled. Her back ached. She developed a craving for pickles that drove Finn to distraction. Some days she felt strong and capable. Other days she could barely get out of bed. The inconsistency frustrated her. She'd always prided herself on reliability, and now her own body was betraying her. One afternoon in late summer, she was sitting on the porch trying to work through the books when the numbers blurred together. She set down her pen, frustrated, and found Finn watching her from the doorway. You all right? I'm fine. You don't look fine. I'm pregnant, not dying. There's a difference. Finn sat beside her. Talk to me. About what? About whatever's making you look like you want to throw that ledger across the yard. Norah sighed. I'm useless. I can't teach. I can't work cattle. I can't even focus on bookkeeping for more than an hour without my brain turning to mush. What good am I? You're growing our child. That seems pretty useful to me. You know what I mean? I do. And I also know you're being too hard on yourself. Finn took her hand. You've spent your whole life proving your worth through work, but you don't have to do that anymore. You've already proven it. To me. To everyone on this ranch. You can just be. I don't know how to just be. Then learn. You've learned everything else. It was such a simple thing to say, but it cracked something open inside Norah. She'd spent so long running, fighting, proving herself that she'd forgotten how to simply exist without justification. The idea of just being, of mattering simply because she was herself and not because of what she could do, felt foreign and terrifying and oddly liberating all at once. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. Of the baby? Of everything. Of being a mother. Of failing. Of becoming someone I don't recognize. You won't. How do you know? Because the core of who you are, that doesn't change. You'll be a mother, but you'll still be Norah, still stubborn, still brave, still you. Norah leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his shoulder, and let herself believe it. The baby came in early October, 3 weeks earlier than Dr. Chen had predicted. Norah's water broke in the middle of the night, soaking through the sheets and waking both her and Finn. The contractions started immediately, hard and fast, giving her no time to prepare. Finn rode through the darkness to fetch Dr. Chen, while Cyrus and Tom's wife Martha stayed with Norah, helping her through the early stages of labor. The pain was worse than anything she'd imagined, waves of agony that made her understand why some women died doing this. She'd faced down armed men, survived humiliation and threats, rebuilt her entire life from nothing. But this was different. This was her body tearing itself apart to bring new life into the world, and she had no control over any of it. Dr. Chen arrived just before dawn. She examined Norah, nodded crisply, and started giving orders. The next hours blurred together. Pain, pressure, Martha's voice telling her to breathe, Dr. Chen's hands firm and sure. Finn somewhere nearby, though she couldn't see him through the haze. The baby came just as the sun crested the horizon, announcing itself with a sharp, indignant cry that cut through Norah's exhaustion like a knife. Dr. Chen lifted the tiny, bloody thing and smiled. A girl. Healthy lungs, all her fingers and toes. Well done, Mrs. Morgan. She placed the baby on Norah's chest. The infant was impossibly small, red-faced and squalling, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that were trying to focus on this strange new world. Norah stared down at her daughter and felt something fundamental shift inside her chest. She's perfect, she whispered. She's loud, Dr. Chen corrected, but she was smiling. Your husband is pacing a hole in the porch. Should I let him in? Yes, please. Finn entered carefully, like he was afraid he might break something. He crossed to the bed and looked down at his daughter, and his expression transformed into something Norah had never seen before. Wonder. Pure, unguarded wonder. Can I hold her? He asked. Norah passed the baby over. Finn cradled her with surprising gentleness for such a large man, and the baby stopped crying almost immediately, staring up at him with those unfocused eyes. What should we name her? Norah asked. They'd discussed names for months without settling on anything, but now, looking at her daughter, Norah knew exactly what felt right. Grace, she said. Her name is Grace. Grace Morgan. Finn tested it, then nodded. It's perfect. Grace Ann Morgan, Norah amended, thinking of her mother. So she has something of all of us. They sat together as the sun filled the room, their daughter sleeping between them, and Norah felt something she'd never quite felt before. Completeness. She'd spent her entire life feeling like something was missing, some essential part of herself that she couldn't name or find. But holding Grace, sitting beside Finn in the early morning light, she realized she'd found it. She'd built it, piece by piece, choice by choice, fight by fight. This was what she'd been running toward all along, even when she thought she was just running away. The weeks after Grace's birth were harder than Norah expected. The baby cried constantly, refused to sleep for more than an hour at a time, and seemed to require every ounce of Norah's energy just to keep alive. She felt overwhelmed, exhausted, and more than once she broke down crying while trying to soothe her screaming daughter at 3 a.m. Finn helped when he could, pacing the floor with Grace when Norah needed sleep, handling night feedings when they'd switched to bottles because nursing proved impossible. Martha came by daily to check on them, offering advice and practical help that kept Norah from drowning completely. It gets easier, Martha promised. The first few months are survival. After that, you'll actually get to enjoy her. I don't feel like I'm surviving. I feel like I'm failing. Every new mother feels that way. You're doing fine. I'm exhausted. I'm confused. I have no idea what I'm doing. That's called being a parent, Martha smiled gently. The secret is nobody knows what they're doing. We're all just making it up as we go. Slowly, painfully, they found their rhythm. Grace's crying fits decreased. She started sleeping in longer stretches. Norah learned to read her daughter's signals, to distinguish between hungry cries and tired cries, and I just want attention cries. Finn became expert at swaddling, at burping, at making funny faces that coaxed smiles from their daughter. By the time Grace was 3 months old, Norah had regained enough energy to start working on the books again. She did it in short bursts, an hour here and there while Grace napped, but it felt good to use her brain for something beyond diapers and feeding schedules. The ranch continued to thrive. The fall cattle drive brought in record profits. The general store in Copper Creek expanded to include a small restaurant. The school Mrs. Patterson ran had grown to 25 students, with families moving to the area specifically for the educational opportunity. People started calling the area around Copper Creek Morgan territory, and while Finn protested the name, it stuck. The Triple M wasn't just a ranch anymore. It was the center of a growing community, a place that represented something larger than just cattle and land. One evening in early spring, when Grace was 6 months old and finally sleeping through the night, Norah and Finn sat on the porch watching the sunset. Grace was in her cradle beside them, making the small snuffling sounds that meant she was deeply asleep. "Do you ever think about Boston?" Finn asked. "Sometimes, but it feels like it happened to someone else." "Do you miss it?" "No, I miss my father sometimes, and I miss the person I thought I could be before Edmund ruined it. But the city itself? The life I had there? No." "What do you think that Norah would say if she could see you now?" Norah considered this. "I think she'd be terrified, and jealous, and maybe a little proud." "Just a little?" "She had very high standards." Norah smiled. "But yeah, she'd be proud. I did what she couldn't. I got out. I built something real." "You did more than that. You changed this whole territory." "I wouldn't go that far." "I would. The school alone has changed everything. Kids who would have grown up illiterate can read now. They've got opportunities they never would have had. That's because of you. That's because of Mrs. Patterson, who you hired. With money you chose to invest in education instead of just hoarding. That was your choice, Norah. Own it." She looked at him, this man who'd bought her freedom and given her space to become herself, and felt overwhelming gratitude for his stubborn insistence that she acknowledge her own worth. "All right," she said. "I changed things. For the better." "Damn right you did." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Grace sleep. Then Norah said, "I want to start something else." "What?" "A women's collective. A place where women can learn trades, get loans to start businesses, support each other. The frontier's full of widows and women with no options. I want to give them what you gave me, a chance." Finn was quiet for a moment. "That's ambitious." "I'm ambitious. You said so yourself." "I did. And I meant it." He reached over and took her hand. "So let's do it. We've got the resources. We've got the reputation. Might as well use it for something that matters." The women's collective started small. Norah rented a building in Copper Creek and put out word that she was looking for women who wanted to learn bookkeeping, sewing, cooking for restaurants, any skill that could translate to income. The first meeting drew 6 women. The second drew 12. By the end of the month, they had 20 women attending regularly. Norah taught bookkeeping. Clara taught retail management. Martha taught practical nursing. They brought in a seamstress from Prescott to teach advanced sewing. They connected women with small loans to start businesses, backed by Norah's money but administered by a board, so it didn't feel like charity. The collective grew. Women started businesses. Widows found ways to support themselves without remarrying out of desperation. Young women learned skills that gave them choices beyond just wife and mother. The men of Copper Creek watched this development with mixed feelings. Some approved, seeing the benefit of a more prosperous community. Others grumbled about women getting above themselves, about the natural order being disrupted. A few tried to cause trouble, spreading rumors or pressuring their wives not to attend. But the women kept coming, because for the first time they had something that most frontier women never got: options. And once you've tasted that kind of freedom, it's almost impossible to give it back. 2 years after Grace's birth, Norah found herself pregnant again. This time she was prepared, or at least she thought she was. The pregnancy was easier than the first, though chasing after a toddler while growing another human proved its own challenge. Grace was walking now, talking in the abbreviated language of 2-year-olds, and possessed a stubbornness that Norah recognized as coming directly from herself. The second baby came in winter, during a rare snowstorm that blanketed the desert in white. Dr. Chen made it to the ranch just in time, and the labor was faster this time, though no less intense. The baby was a boy, healthy and loud, with Finn's gray eyes and Norah's determined chin. They named him James, after Finn's father, with the middle name Thomas for Tom Ridley, who'd become more than just a foreman. He'd become family. With 2 children, the ranch took on a different rhythm. Grace learned to be gentle with her baby brother. James grew from an infant into a curious, active boy who seemed determined to climb everything and put everything in his mouth. Norah and Finn divided responsibilities, trading off childcare and ranch work and collective management, sometimes feeling like they were barely keeping ahead of the chaos. But they were happy, tired, overwhelmed, sometimes frustrated, but fundamentally happy in a way that ran deeper than circumstances or convenience. 5 years after Norah had stood on that auction platform in Copper Creek, humiliated and afraid, she stood in the same town square at a very different kind of gathering. The territorial governor was visiting, and he'd asked specifically to meet the woman who'd started the Morgan Collective. Governor Hayes, no relation to Margaret, though they shared a similar no-nonsense demeanor, shook Norah's hand firmly. "Mrs. Morgan, your reputation precedes you." "I hope that's a good thing, Governor." "It's an exceptional thing. The work you're doing here, empowering women to support themselves, it's revolutionary. And the results speak for themselves. Copper Creek's economy has grown 40% since you started. That's remarkable." "I had a lot of help." "I'm sure you did. But you were the one who saw what needed to be done and made it happen." The governor paused, then said, "I'm creating a territorial commission on women's economic development. I'd like you to chair it." Norah blinked. "Me?" "Governor, I'm not a politician. I don't want a politician. I want someone who understands what frontier women need and how to deliver it. That's you. I have a ranch to help run, 2 small children. I can't just... Think about it. The position comes with resources, authority, the ability to expand what you've started here across the entire territory. You could help thousands of women, Mrs. Morgan, not just the ones in Copper Creek." He left her with a formal letter detailing the position. Norah took it home and showed it to Finn that evening after the children were asleep. "What do you think?" she asked. Finn read the letter carefully. "I think it's an incredible opportunity, and I think you'd be amazing at it. But I also know you're stretched thin already, and I don't want you to take on more just because you feel like you have to prove something." "I don't—" Norah stopped. He was right. Part of her was tempted by the position because it felt like validation, like proof that she mattered. But she'd spent the past 5 years learning that she didn't need external validation. She mattered because of who she was and what she chose to do, not because of titles or positions. "I'm going to say no," she said. "You sure?" "I'm sure. What we're doing here, it's enough. It's more than enough. I don't need to change the whole territory. I just need to keep changing this corner of it." Finn nodded, looking relieved. "For what it's worth, I think that's the right choice." Norah wrote to the governor declining the position but recommending Margaret Hayes instead, who'd recently semi-retired from law practice and would be perfect for the role. The governor took her suggestion, and Hayes threw herself into the work with characteristic intensity. Life settled into something resembling normalcy, though normal was a relative term when you were running a ranch, raising 2 small children, managing a women's collective, and trying to maintain some kind of marriage through all of it. There were days when Norah felt like she was failing at everything. Days when she snapped at Finn over nothing, when she lost patience with the children, when she wanted to just run away from all the responsibility and never look back. But she didn't run, because she'd learned the hard way that running doesn't solve anything. It just moves the problems around. Real change, real growth, happened when you stood still and did the hard work of building something worth keeping. On a warm evening in late spring, 10 years after that first auction, Norah stood on the porch of the Triple M watching her children play in the yard. Grace was 12 now, already showing signs of the woman she'd become. Sharp, independent, unafraid to speak her mind. James was 8, all energy and curiosity, constantly asking questions about how things worked and why. Finn came up beside her, his arm sliding around her waist. They'd both aged in the past decade. Finn's hair was graying at the temples. Lines had formed around Nora's eyes. But they'd aged together, weathered together, and that shared history had bound them in ways that went beyond simple love. "What are you thinking about?" Finn asked. "How different everything is. How different I am." "You have regrets?" "Not even one." She leaned into him. "Do you?" "Only that I didn't buy you off that platform sooner," Norah laughed. "You couldn't have. I wasn't there to be bought sooner." "Fair point." Finn was quiet for a moment. "You know what I think about sometimes?" "What?" "That day. When I paid $500 for you and everyone thought I was crazy. Tom tried to talk me out of it, said I was throwing money away on a woman who'd probably just run off at the first opportunity. I almost did run, but you didn't. You stayed. You chose this. And that choice, that trust, it gave me something I didn't know I needed." "What?" "A partner. A real one. Someone who chose to be here not because she had to, but because she wanted to." He pulled her closer. "You saved me too, you know. I was turning into a bitter old man, alone on this ranch with nothing but cattle and work. You reminded me what it meant to actually live." Norah felt tears prick her eyes. After 10 years, he could still undo her with simple honesty. "We saved each other," she said. "That's what partners do." They stood together as the sun set, painting the desert in shades of orange and gold, and watched their children play. Grace was teaching James how to rope a fence post, her movements confident and sure. James was trying hard, failing spectacularly, but laughing through the frustration. "She's going to be formidable," Finn observed. "She already is. Takes after her mother." "Poor thing." Norah elbowed him, and he laughed. The sound was warm and genuine, and it filled something inside her that she hadn't even realized was empty. That night, after the children were asleep and the ranch was quiet, Norah sat at her desk going through the books. The Triple M was more than just profitable now. It was thriving. They employed 30 hands, managed over 3,000 head of cattle, and owned nearly 50,000 acres. The general store was expanding again. The school had added a second building. The Women's Collective had helped start 43 businesses in the past 5 years. It was more than Norah had ever imagined when she'd fled Boston with nothing but a small bag and desperate hope. She'd wanted freedom. She'd found that and so much more. There was a soft knock on the door. Grace peeked in, her hair loose around her shoulders. "Mama, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart. Come in." Grace sat in the chair across from the desk, looking serious. "Sarah Miller's mother told her that you used to be sold at an auction, like a slave. Is that true?" Nora's chest tightened. She'd known this conversation would come eventually, but she'd hoped for a few more years before having to explain the worst moment of her life to her daughter. "It's true," she said carefully. "But it wasn't like slavery. It was different, though not by much." "What happened?" Norah took a breath and told her. Not everything. Grace was too young for some details, but enough. The arrest, the humiliation, the auction, Finn stepping forward, the choice she'd made to follow him instead of running. Grace listened intently, her young face troubled. When Norah finished, she said, "That's horrible. How could they do that to you?" "Because the law allowed it. And because I was different. I wore pants. I carried a gun. I didn't act the way they thought women should act, so they punished me for it. That's not fair." "No, it's not. But fairness isn't something you're given. It's something you fight for." "Is that why you started the collective? To help women fight?" "Partly. But also because I remember what it felt like to have no options. To be completely at someone else's mercy. I wanted to make sure other women didn't have to feel that way." Grace was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then she said, "I'm glad Papa bought you." Norah smiled despite the ache in her chest. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too. And I'm glad you're my mama, even if you used to be scandalous." "Oh, I'm still scandalous. I just hide it better now." Grace giggled and came around the desk to hug her. Norah held her daughter tight, breathing in the scent of her hair, and felt overwhelming gratitude that Grace would grow up in a world where she had choices, where she could wear pants without being arrested, where she could own property and make her own decisions and be whoever she wanted to be. It wasn't a perfect world. There was still inequality, still injustice, still men who thought women should know their place. But it was better. And it would keep getting better as long as people kept fighting for it. The years continued to pass. Grace grew into a remarkable young woman, graduating from the school at 16 and declaring her intention to become a lawyer like Margaret Hayes. James showed a talent for engineering and mathematics, spending hours designing elaborate irrigation systems for the ranch. Finn's hair went fully gray. Nora's hands developed calluses from years of work, and laugh lines deepened around her eyes. The Triple M became legendary throughout the territory, not just for its size and success, but for what it represented. A place where hard work mattered more than gender or background. A place where a woman could be respected for her strength instead of punished for it. A place that proved the old rules didn't have to be the only rules. People came from across the West to see the ranch, to learn from the collective, to understand how Norah and Finn had built something so different from the typical frontier operation. Some came with genuine curiosity. Others came hoping to find flaws, to prove that such an enterprise couldn't last. But it did last. Year after year, through droughts and harsh winters, through economic downturns and cattle diseases, through all the challenges that broke lesser operations, the Triple M endured. And at the center of it all was a partnership built on mutual respect, hard-won trust, and the simple choice to keep choosing each other every single day. 20 years after the auction, Norah stood in the same Copper Creek town square, but everything had changed. The rough frontier town had become a proper city, with brick buildings and paved streets, and a railroad station that connected them to the wider world. The general store was now a department store. The schoolhouse had become a full academy with multiple teachers. The women's collective occupied an entire building downtown, its success so evident that similar organizations had sprung up in towns across the territory. The territorial governor, a different one now, Hayes having retired years ago, had declared a Morgan Day to honor the contributions Finn and Norah had made to the territory's development. The whole town had turned out for the ceremony, along with people from as far away as Tucson and Flagstaff. Norah stood on a platform. The irony wasn't lost on her, and looked out at the crowd. Grace was there, home from law school for the occasion. James stood beside her, nearly as tall as his father now. Finn was next to Norah, his hand warm in hers. The mayor gave a speech about vision and perseverance. The governor presented them with a formal commendation. People applauded. It was all very official and slightly overwhelming. When they asked Norah to speak, she almost declined. She'd never been comfortable with public attention. But then she thought about that terrified woman on the auction platform 2 decades ago, and she realized that woman would want her to speak, would need her to speak. She stepped forward. 20 years ago, she began, I stood in this square as a criminal. My crime was wearing pants. For that, I was humiliated, auctioned off, and told I needed to be controlled by a man who could provide proper guidance. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the uplifting speech they'd been expecting. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you this because it matters. Because the only difference between that woman and this one is that I was given a choice. One man, Finn Morgan, gave me back my freedom and asked for nothing in return except honest work. And that choice, that freedom, it changed everything. She paused, gathering her thoughts. We talk about the American frontier like it's a place of freedom and opportunity, and it can be. But it can also be a place where the same old rules get reinforced, just with different scenery. Women are property. Workers don't matter. Might makes right. That's the easy way. That's the default. Building something better takes work. It takes choosing to do the hard thing, the uncomfortable thing, every single day. It takes looking at the way things have always been done and asking, is this the way things have to be done? And when the answer is no, having the courage to try something different. She looked out at the crowd, at the faces watching her. The Triple M isn't special because we have more cattle or more land. It's special because we decided people matter more than tradition, because we chose partnership over hierarchy, because we built a place where strength is valued regardless of who has it. That's what I hope my legacy is. Not the ranch, not the collective, but the idea that you can choose to build something better, that the way things are isn't the way things have to be. And that sometimes the most radical thing you can do is just give someone the freedom to be themselves and then get out of their way. She stepped back. For a moment there was silence, then applause, hesitant at first, then growing. Not everyone agreed with her. She could see disapproval on some faces, but that was fine. She wasn't trying to make everyone happy, she was just telling the truth. After the ceremony, they walked back to the ranch as the sun set. Grace and James had gone ahead with friends, leaving Finn and Norah alone for the first time all day. That was quite a speech, Finn said. Too much? Not enough. You should have told them about the time you shot Thornton's man off his horse. That seemed less appropriate for a civic ceremony. Fair enough. Finn squeezed her hand. I'm proud of you, not just for today, for everything. I'm proud of us, Norah corrected. We did this together. We did. But you're the one who had the courage to stay when you could have run. That choice, that trust, it made all of this possible. They crested the final hill, and the ranch spread out before them. The main house they'd expanded over the years. The barns and outbuildings, the corrals full of horses, the distant figures of the hands finishing evening chores. Grace and James visible on the porch, arguing about something with the easy familiarity of siblings who genuinely liked each other. This was home. Not just a place, but a life they'd built together from broken pieces and desperate hope and stubborn refusal to accept that things couldn't change. Do you ever wonder how different your life would have been if I hadn't bought you that day? Finn asked quietly. Norah thought about it. Sometimes, but not in a way that matters, because this is the life I have. This is the life I chose every day for 20 years, and I'd choose it again. Even the hard parts? Especially the hard parts. The hard parts are what made it real. They stood on the hill as night fell, watching their home light up against the darkness. Lanterns flickered in windows. Smoke rose from chimneys. The sounds of evening carried on the cool air, cattle lowing, hands laughing, the distant bark of dogs. In a few months, Norah would be a grandmother. Grace had quietly revealed at dinner that she was engaged to a young lawyer she'd met at school, a man who respected her ambitions and supported her career. James was talking about building a new kind of windmill that could irrigate twice as much land with half the water. The ranch continued to grow. The collective continued to expand. Life continued to move forward, always forward, never standing still. And at the center of it all was a choice. The choice to stay instead of run, to build instead of destroy, to trust instead of fear, to be brave enough to be yourself even when the world told you that self wasn't acceptable. That's what freedom actually meant, Norah had learned. Not the absence of constraints, but the power to choose which constraints you'd accept and which you'd fight against. The ability to look at your life and say, this is mine, I built this, and it matters. She'd been sold on an auction platform for the crime of wearing pants. She'd been terrified and humiliated and certain her life was over. Instead, it had just begun. 2 decades later, standing on a hill overlooking the empire she'd built, the family she'd raised, the community she'd helped shape, Norah Morgan finally understood something fundamental. The woman on that platform hadn't been powerless. She'd been powerful in ways she didn't yet recognize. Powerful enough to survive, to choose, to change not just her own life, but the lives of everyone around her. That power had always been there. Finn had just given her the space to discover it. Come on, she said to her husband, tugging his hand. Let's go home. They walked down the hill together toward the lights and warmth of the house, toward their children and their life and their future. And with every step, Norah felt grateful. Not for what she'd been given, but for what she'd built. For every hard choice, every difficult day, every moment of doubt that she'd pushed through anyway. Because that's what strength really was. Not the absence of fear, but the decision to keep moving forward despite it. And Norah Morgan, formerly Norah Bennett of Boston, formerly the woman humiliated on an auction platform in Copper Creek, had been moving forward for 20 years. She had no intention of stopping now.